A hand tightly grips a small, patterned handkerchief, a physical reminder of a lesson learned the hard way. There are certain things in this world that simply cannot be trusted, and the weight of past mistakes serves as a bitter reminder of the price already paid. This realization stems from a moment in the school hallway, where a young woman kneels before a boy, her presence a stark contrast to the cynical thoughts swirling in his mind. He remains guarded, his gaze averted as he dwells on the specific nature of his distrust. The source of his internal conflict is right there: girls who appear kind, especially those who show kindness directly to him, like the one now offering back his handkerchief with a soft, expectant look. Walking through the crowded school corridors, Yuta Tano carries this burden of skepticism. While other students are swept up in the excitement surrounding his brother, Ray, Yuta remains an outsider by choice, a high school boy who has learned to keep his distance from the opposite sex. His cynicism is well-earned, forged through a series of painful encounters where girls only approached him as a stepping stone to reach his charismatic older brother. He recalls the stings of rejection and the hollow apologies of those who used his feelings just to get closer to Ray's side. Back in the classroom, he reinforces this mental fortress, resolving once and for all to stop placing his trust in girls. However, the quiet of his resolve is suddenly broken when a familiar voice calls out his name. She stands there, Izumi Hoju, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with a gentle good morning. Despite her pleasant greeting, his mind remains fixed on his new mantra. He cannot trust them, not a single one of them. She stands in the hallway, a silent presence that Yuta cannot help but include in his sweeping generalizations about the hidden motives of every girl he meets. Day after day, she offers a cheerful greeting, only to be met with his cold indifference or a sharp, dismissive turn of the head as he tries to maintain his emotional distance. Growing tired of the silence, she finally corners him, claiming she couldn't hear his response. This persistence forces him to bark back a loud, frustrated greeting just to end the awkward exchange and escape her gaze. She simply smiles at his outburst, acknowledging his reply with a gentle warmth that seems entirely out of place given his obvious hostility. The interaction leaves him reeling, his heart racing as he clutches his head in a desperate attempt to regain his composure and understand why he is so easily flustered by a simple smile. He identifies her as Izumi Hoju, a classmate who has been making a persistent, inexplicable effort to bridge the gap between them over the last few weeks. Despite her apparent kindness, he remains convinced that she is merely another admirer of his brother, especially as he overhears other students praising her beauty and declaring her the perfect match for the elder Tano. His suspicions are interrupted when she suddenly leans in close to ask about his favorite type of bread, catching him so off guard that he blurts out a preference for melon bread before he can stop himself. Her friend quickly picks up on the suggestion, dragging her toward the cafeteria with the promise of finding exactly what he mentioned, leaving him standing alone in the hallway. Later, as he sits alone eating the very bread they discussed, he finds himself deeply unsettled by how easily she managed to disrupt his defenses and make him act against his own cynical nature. He stands amidst the chatter of the gymnasium, his eyes fixed on the basketball court where Izumi Hoju is the center of attention. Around him, the other students can't stop talking about her, whispering about how cute she looks while playing and how her presence alone elevates the atmosphere of the game. As the game continues, his companions chime in, noting that her appeal goes beyond her looks. She has excellent grades and a mysterious aura that only adds to her charm. He remains silent, his expression a mask of skepticism as they gush over her vibe and her ability to keep everyone guessing about what she's truly thinking. On the court, she moves with a determined energy, the rhythmic thumping of the ball echoing through the hall as she weaves through the other players. Despite the build-up, she misses her shot, the ball clattering off the rim as he watches with a critical eye. He questions why she even asked for the pass if she wasn't going to score, wondering if her supposed athletic prowess is just another part of an act she's putting on for the crowd. Even after the miss, she seems strangely satisfied, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips that leaves him even more baffled. His friends are quick to defend her, claiming she only missed by a bit and is still adorable, while he vehemently denies that he was even watching her in the first place, trying to hide his growing preoccupation. She pauses to wipe the sweat from her brow, a soft, genuine smile lighting up her face as she catches her breath. The sight is enough to leave his friend starstruck, though he tries to maintain his distance and ignore the magnetic pull of her personality. Suddenly, their eyes meet, and he feels a jolt of confusion as he realizes she was looking directly at him. He quickly turns away, his mind racing as he tries to make sense of why she would be singling him out in a room full of admirers. The school bell eventually signals the end of the day, and he makes his way out, the persistent thoughts of her behavior weighing heavily on him. He admits to himself that her recent actions have been driving him to distraction, primarily because he cannot begin to fathom what her true intentions are. A realization strikes him. Despite all their interactions, she hasn't mentioned his famous brother once. This deviation from the usual pattern of girls approaching him only to get to Ray is deeply unsettling and challenges his core assumptions. For a fleeting, dangerous moment, he wonders if she could actually be interested in him for who he is, but the sight of another student swooning over a poster of his brother quickly brings him back to his cynical reality. He reminds himself that in this school, everyone is eventually drawn into Ray's orbit, and he is likely no exception to the rule. He stands in the bustling school corridor, his gaze drifting toward the crowd of students. The familiar hum of chatter fills the air, a constant reminder of the social hierarchy he navigates daily. This cynicism stems from a long history of observation. He recalls a time when a girl approached his brother, Ray, with a gift. While onlookers whispered about the girl's beauty and her year, he had already reached a bitter conclusion. She was just another admirer drawn to his brother's life. The pattern repeated endlessly, with girls literally trampling over him in their desperate rush to reach the popular Ray. He had learned the hard way that any kindness directed toward him was merely a stepping stone, a realization that often left him physically and emotionally sidelined. Even those who acted friendly were merely using him as a vantage point, their eyes always fixed on the brother walking just ahead of him. He felt like a ghost in his own life, a convenient proxy for those seeking proximity to perfection. Because of these scars, he found it impossible to trust anyone, yet a soft voice suddenly breaks through his internal monologue. A patterned handkerchief is extended toward him as someone asks if he is all right. Looking up, he sees Izumi kneeling on the floor before him, her expression one of genuine concern. She offers the small cloth, a simple gesture of kindness that stands in stark contrast to the cold calculations he has come to expect. She holds his gaze, repeating her offer and telling him he can use the handkerchief if he needs it. Her presence is calm and steady, seemingly unaffected by the social currents swirling around them. Around them, the hallway remains a hive of activity, with other students casting curious glances and whispering as they pass. He remains frozen on the floor, the weight of his past experiences clashing with the reality of her selfless act. The confusion finally boils over, and he demands to know why she is helping him. His voice trembles with a mix of suspicion and desperation as he asks the one question that has haunted him. Why isn't she chasing after his brother like everyone else? She is momentarily caught off guard by his bluntness, her eyes darting away before she manages a hesitant, uncertain response. The silence between them stretches, thick with the unspoken tension of a world where such simple kindness is an anomaly. She stands amidst the usual clamor of the hallway, where a crowd of admirers has gathered around his brother, their excited cries echoing through the corridor. When he questions her motives, she remains composed, her silence drawing his intense scrutiny. With a soft, earnest expression, she finally offers an explanation. She simply states that her actions were driven by the fact that she found him, a confession that carries an unexpected depth of sincerity. Because of this admission, she reaches out to offer him her handkerchief, insisting that he take it. He accepts the cloth with a hesitant, flustered gratitude, his usual skepticism momentarily faltering. She then crouches down, looking up at him with a gentle, knowing smile. Her quiet response to his thanks is a simple assurance that he is welcome, further disarming his defenses. As she prepares to depart, she glances back over her shoulder, reminding him to return the handkerchief later. She adds with a playful tone that it happens to be her favorite one, leaving him with a lingering sense of obligation. Watching her walk away, he remains rooted to the spot, his mind racing to find a cynical explanation. He convinces himself that there is no doubt she is merely using him as a stepping stone to get to his brother, Ray. This thought repeats like a mantra in his head, a desperate attempt to shield his heart. He tells himself over and over that such a thing is impossible, that there is simply no way her intentions are pure. He clutches his head in frustration, his face flushed with embarrassment. He vows to himself that he will not allow his feelings to be manipulated or be deceived ever again. Meanwhile, she returns to her friend, who immediately notices her upbeat mood and asks if something good occurred. She gives a simple, affirmative response, keeping the details of her encounter with the boy to herself. Ray Tano stands at the center of a whirlwind of admiration, his polished appearance drawing squeals of delight from the surrounding girls. He offers a practiced, charming smile, fully aware of the effect his presence has on the student body. Watching from the periphery, his older brother, Yuta, feels a familiar weight of cynicism. As classmates whisper about the connection between the two, Yuta's expression darkens. He has long since concluded that the attention he receives is merely a byproduct of his brother's popularity, leading to a deep-seated distrust of the girls who approach him. This suspicion is immediately tested when Izumi Hoju makes her way toward him, her presence noted by the other students. He watches her approach with a guarded gaze, convinced that she, like all the others, is simply using him as a stepping stone to reach Ray. He finds her already occupied, having claimed his desk as her own. When he flatly informs her that she is in his seat, she doesn't move to leave, instead casually suggesting that they simply share the small space. The absurdity of the suggestion leaves him reeling, his mind racing with the impossibility of such an arrangement. He remains certain that her persistence is a calculated move to gain favor with his brother, even as he acknowledges that she possesses a significant following of her own within the classroom. She leans in dangerously close, her eyes fixed on the journal he holds. When she comments on his apparent confidence in his writing, he can only stare back, unsettled by her proximity and the strange, unpredictable nature of her behavior. Their interaction is abruptly cut short by a classmate's energetic arrival, brandishing a sign and loudly proclaiming that it is time for a surprise math quiz. The sudden announcement catches him completely off guard, his focus shifting instantly from his social anxieties to the academic threat at hand. As the classroom settles into the tense silence of the examination, he sits hunched over his desk, the weight of the unexpected challenge pressing down on him. The results are devastating, a meager 5 points out of 50 staring back at him from the top of his paper. As the teacher announces the necessity of makeup tests for those who failed, he sinks into a state of profound gloom, the day's social pressures now compounded by academic failure. He is relentlessly teased by his classmates, who mock his overconfidence and his recent failure. Despite his protests, the weight of his academic duties and the looming makeup exam press down on him, forcing a realization that he must dedicate himself to his studies immediately. Deciding that his home environment might be too distracting, he heads toward the school library. He watches as other students head home, feeling a sense of isolation in his academic struggle as he enters the quiet hall. Settling into a quiet corner, he stares blankly at his math problems. Even with the change of scenery, the complex equations remain a blur, and he finds himself no closer to understanding the material than he was in the classroom. His concentration is shattered when a familiar face suddenly leans into his personal space. It is Izumi, who bluntly informs him that he has made a mistake on his very first line of work, sending a jolt of surprise through him. He is genuinely stunned to find her here, having never pegged her as the type to frequent the library. She offers a soft apology for the intrusion, but he remains preoccupied with the sight of her actually studying hard. In his mind, he compares this studious version of her to the girl he sees on social media, posing at trendy cafes. The contrast between her online persona and her presence in this quiet hall is jarring to his expectations. He watches as she pulls out a light novel with an absurdly long title, further complicating his perception of her. He struggles to reconcile her reputation as a popular, flirty girl with the quiet, bookish person sitting before him, desperately trying to ignore the fluttering in his chest. He feels the tension rise as she scoots her chair even closer to his, her proximity making his heart race. When he nervously questions her move, she simply asks if he requires assistance, leaving him stammering and unsure of how to react. She leans over his shoulder, noting with a hint of amusement that his page is still completely blank. He feels a wave of embarrassment at being caught in his state of unproductive paralysis. He recalls a classmate mentioning her intelligence and decides to test the theory. He shows her the failed quiz from earlier, and she examines the paper with a focused, discerning gaze that suggests she might actually be the help he needs. She scrutinizes his failed exam with a smirk, while nearby, Takamiya and Aniray whisper about how she always seems to be spacing out in class. He is immediately defensive, his face reddening as he tries to snatch the paper back from her judgmental gaze. Because of his stubborn attitude, she gives him a firm shove, reminding him that he was the one who sought her assistance. He can only grumble in defeat as she takes charge, her confidence making it clear that she won't tolerate any more excuses. In response to his grumbling, she leans in close and declares her intent to teach him every concept he failed to master. He finds himself unable to argue, captivated by her sudden intensity and the earnestness in her eyes. Moments later, they are deep into a study session at the table, where he works through problems under her silent, watchful eye. The only sound is the scratching of his pen, though he can't help but let out a nervous gulp as he feels the weight of her constant observation. As the hours pass and the clock strikes 8, he finally drops his pen with a shout of triumph, having finished the entire set of exercises. He looks over to share his victory, finding her still sitting patiently by his side. She is quietly reading a book, seemingly lost in her own world until he asks her to check his work. Without missing a beat, she reveals that she finished her own tasks long ago and was simply waiting for him to reach the end. This realization hits him like a physical blow, making him wonder why she would go to such lengths just to stay with him. He grips his pen tightly, his heart racing as he considers the possibility that her feelings might run deeper than simple friendship. While he is lost in thought, she pulls her chair even closer, the sound of the legs scraping against the floor cutting through the silence. The sudden lack of distance between them makes his pulse quicken, his focus shifting entirely from his studies to her presence. She leans over the table to inspect his answers, her face just inches from his as she softly confirms that he got everything right. The combination of her proximity and her praise is too much for him to handle, and his heart begins to pound against his ribs. The sheer intensity of the moment causes him to practically short-circuit, steam billowing from his head as he sits in a daze. The sound of his mother returning home finally breaks the tension, leaving him paralyzed with embarrassment while his companion remains remarkably unfazed. He gasps in shock as the door suddenly creaks open, revealing a man in a sharp suit who looks on in utter disbelief at the sight of them still awake. The unexpected interruption sends a jolt of panic through him, his cheeks burning with a fierce blush as he fumbles for an explanation. Despite the chaotic end to the night, the grueling study session would eventually pay off, resulting in a flawless performance on his test the following morning. He can hear the frantic drumming of his own heart as she closes the gap between them, her expression softening into a warm, bashful smile. Leaning in until their faces are nearly touching, she whispers her approval, confirming that he has finally grasped the lesson. The sheer intensity of her gaze and the scent of her presence leave him completely breathless, his pulse racing out of control. Yuditano stands before the local supermarket, a first-year high school student tasked with a mundane chore. He is on a grocery run, faced with the humble selection of the produce aisle. Reaching for a bag of carrots, he grumbles at the rising costs, lamenting that such basic necessities seem priced only for the wealthy. His internal monologue is cut short when he spots a familiar face. Izumi Hoju is nearby, humming a simple tune about vegetables as she selects a head of cabbage, leaving him stunned by the unexpected encounter. She notices him as well, casually asking if he is also out handling the household shopping, breaking the silence of the aisle. He finds himself momentarily distracted, noting that her casual attire is a refreshing change from their school uniforms and silently admitting her charm. Shaking off the thought, he becomes flustered, realizing he is letting her presence affect him, especially as she glances toward his basket and spots his impulsive purchase. She inquires about his specific needs, curious about what he is searching for among the aisles while observing his flustered state. When he presents his organized list of meat and vegetables, she immediately points out the discrepancy. A box of cookies that definitely wasn't on the official tally, despite his excuses about using leftover change. With a firm but playful authority, she insists that snacks are a secondary priority and tells him to return them to the shelf. She maintains a playful, almost mischievous expression, her eyes narrowed as she scrutinizes the list in his hand. She can't help but laugh, pointing out that despite his protests, he clearly had ice cream written down the whole time. He tries to snatch the paper back, his face reddening as he realizes his secret stash has been discovered. After finishing their errands, Izumi walks alongside him toward the exit, her mood significantly lightened. She thanks him for the help, noting that his presence made the shopping trip much more efficient than she expected. He, however, can only mutter under his breath, still feeling the sting of her teasing. With a final wave and a cheerful farewell, she disappears into the distance, leaving Yuta standing alone with his bags. He remains rooted to the spot for a moment, the silence of the street a sharp contrast to the chaotic energy she brought to the supermarket. He is suddenly pulled from his thoughts by the shopkeeper, who leans over the counter with a knowing smile. She asks if the girl who just left was a friend of his, her curiosity piqued by their lively interaction. The question catches him completely off guard, causing a deep flush to creep up his neck as he frantically denies any romantic connection. Yuta stammers that she is merely a classmate, his heart racing as the shopkeeper chuckles at his obvious discomfort. As he begins his walk home, the image of her genuine smile lingers in his mind, a sight he realizes he has rarely, if ever, witnessed at school. He wonders if their bickering actually looked like a date to outsiders, a thought that makes him feel both confused and strangely unsettled. He tries to rationalize his feelings, reminding himself that his only goal is to use Izumi to get closer to his popular brother, Ray. Despite his attempts to remain detached, he finds himself sighing with relief at having managed to save some money today, even if the emotional cost was higher than anticipated. The sudden onset of rain interrupts his internal monologue, and his eyes widen as he spots her standing under a nearby awning, looking stranded. It is clear she's forgotten her umbrella, and she stares out at the downpour with a look of quiet resignation. He hesitates for a heartbeat before approaching her, his umbrella held out as a silent offering of shelter. Yuta tells himself that this act of kindness has nothing to do with his personal feelings, but the way he avoids her gaze suggests otherwise. Under the shared canopy of the umbrella, he remains silent, his thoughts a tangled mess of denial and growing realization. He continues to insist to himself that his actions are purely transactional, yet the proximity to Izumi makes it harder to maintain his cold exterior. Yuta extends his umbrella toward Izumi, his face flushed with a mix of concern and embarrassment. He warns her that staying out in the downpour will surely lead to a cold, insisting she take his protection from the rain. He holds the handle out to her as their shoes splash against the rain-slicked pavement. She hesitates, her voice soft with uncertainty as she asks if he is truly certain about giving up his only cover. Despite his initial intention to simply hand it over, he finds himself walking shoulder to shoulder with her beneath the small canopy. He reflects on the unexpected turn of events, his heart racing at the proximity he hadn't planned for. He stammers an apology, his mind racing with the assumption that most girls would find sharing such a confined space with a boy to be unpleasant. She, however, seems unfazed, offering a quiet sound of surprise at his sudden bashfulness. She reassures him that everything is fine, her expression calm despite the narrow space. He, on the other hand, is acutely aware of how close they are standing, his thoughts swirling with the realization that a single-person umbrella was never meant for two. As they continue their rhythmic pace through the wet streets, she silently observes the lack of distance between them. The shared space feels heavy with a new kind of tension that neither seems ready to address. He steals a glance at her, his eyes narrowing as he tries to rationalize her behavior. He wonders if her compliance is merely a calculated move to stay on his good side, unable to fully grasp her genuine feelings. The sound of a heavy vehicle approaching breaks the quiet of their walk as a van speeds through a large puddle nearby. The looming threat of a massive splash suddenly interrupts their shared moment. He reacts instantly, shouting a warning as he throws himself between her and the wall of water. The deluge hits him full force, drenching his uniform while he successfully shields her from the mess. While the vehicle disappears into the distance, she looks at him with wide, worried eyes, asking if he is all right. Drenched and shivering, he insists he is fine, his first instinct being to check if she managed to stay dry. He stands there, water dripping from his hair and clothes, while she points out the obvious. He wouldn't be so soaked if he had just shared the umbrella properly. He brushes it off with a blush, insisting that as long as she stays dry, nothing else matters. His earnestness causes her to pause, a stifled sound escaping her lips as he watches her in confused silence. Suddenly, she erupts into a fit of genuine laughter, her eyes crinkling as she playfully asks what on earth he thinks he's doing. The sound of her joy cuts through the rhythmic drumming of the rain. He looks away, offering a quiet apology while grappling with a realization he can't quite voice. Moments later, her laughter subsides into a warm smile as she thanks him for shielding her from the splash earlier. He tries to play it cool, insisting it was no big deal, though the proximity under the small umbrella makes his heart race. As they continue their walk through the relentless downpour, he realizes the rain shows no sign of stopping. He can't help but think about how strange she is, finding humor in the most unexpected moments. He finds that the memory of her smile lingers, causing a strange fluttering in his chest that he can't quite explain. She suggests they hurry home before the chill sets in, leaving him with the realization that she is someone far more impactful on his life than he ever imagined. The classroom is a cacophony of excitement and chatter, marking the arrival of one of high school's most pivotal moments, the seat change. Students scramble to their new positions, some celebrating their proximity to friends while others lament their luck. Amidst the shuffling, Yuta finds himself in a precarious position. The one person he feels he must be most wary of, Izumi Hoju, has been assigned a desk directly beside his. He sits stiffly, his mind racing as he processes this unexpected development. She leans in close, her presence suddenly overwhelming as she offers a polite greeting, asking him to treat her well. He can only manage a flustered, stammering response, acutely aware of the curious gazes from their classmates as she settles into her new spot. He remains deeply suspicious, convinced that her placement next to him cannot be mere coincidence. To him, this seating change feels less like a random event and more like a carefully laid trap, leaving him to wonder what her true intentions might be. However, he quickly shifts his perspective, deciding to transform this perceived misfortune into a strategic advantage. He resolves to use this proximity to finally peel back her layers and uncover the truth behind the facade she presents to the world. His intense scrutiny does not go unnoticed, as she suddenly turns to demand why he is staring at her. Caught off guard, he offers a clumsy excuse about looking at the distant mountains, but her piercing, silent gaze suggests she isn't entirely convinced. The surrounding whispers of their peers only add to his confusion, with some suggesting she has her own ulterior motives for being near him. He eventually gives up trying to decipher her behavior, realizing that her thought process remains an utter mystery to him. He turns his attention to her desk, noting how it seems to radiate a bright, cheerful energy that stands in stark contrast to his own. Her school supplies are adorned with cute accessories, including a peculiar, bouncy mascot that catches his eye. Noticing his interest, she holds up the strange creature, identifying it as a lazy dog and asking if he finds it cute or if it's currently popular. He stares at the odd object, once again left bewildered by her unexpected and seemingly innocent curiosity. He watches as she holds the small mascot close to her face, a playful glint in her eyes as she remarks on the resemblance between the lazy dog and him. Nearby, his brother and their classmates share a laugh, their easy camaraderie a sharp contrast to his own internal turmoil as he loudly rejects the comparison. Retreating to the safety of his desk, he grumbles to himself about the futility of his investigation, realizing he has gained no leverage over her at all. He steals a glance toward her, his mind racing with questions about her true motives, especially since most who seek his company are merely after information about his popular brother. The classroom settles into a quiet rhythm, and as they sit side by side, she reaches for a pair of glasses, a small change that catches him completely off guard. He stares in disbelief at her new appearance, finding the sight of her focused intently on her notes while wearing the frames surprisingly impactful. Leaning in to whisper, he questions her about her vision, prompting her to explain that while her sight is normally fine, the new seating arrangement in the back of the room necessitates the extra help. Their quiet exchange is interrupted by the instructor's voice calling out his name, just as she mentions her usual perfect vision, leaving him momentarily stunned. A fleeting memory of his childhood as an active, outdoorsy boy playing in the woods flickers through his mind, a stark contrast to his current distracted state. Reality crashes back in as he realizes he hasn't heard a word of the lesson, his face breaking into a nervous sweat while the teacher waits for an answer he doesn't have. He stands frozen as the word persistence hangs in the air, a lifeline thrown by the girl beside him. He looks down at her, bewildered by the sudden and unexpected assistance. The teacher's voice cuts through his confusion, demanding to know if he heard the question. Sweat beads on his forehead as he weighs the risk. He wonders if she is truly providing the correct answer or leading him into a trap. Memories of their brief and enigmatic interactions flicker through his mind, fueling his hesitation. He struggles with the fundamental question of whether he can actually trust anything she tells him. His jaw tightens and he winces, the pressure of the silent classroom becoming almost unbearable. The internal conflict is visible in the sharp lines of his face as he prepares to take a leap of faith. Finally, he forces the word out, stammering that the answer is persistence. Beside him, she remains focused on her work, her expression unreadable as she continues to write. The classroom erupts as the teacher confirms the answer is correct, even breaking into a small, celebratory dance. He can only offer a quiet, embarrassed word of thanks while trying to hide his reddening face behind a cough. She, however, makes no effort to hide her satisfaction, a smug smile playing on her lips as she adjusts her glasses. The light catches the lenses, emphasizing the quiet triumph in her gaze. Seeing her reaction, his face burns even hotter with a deep blush. He watches her twirl her pen with practiced ease, unable to fathom why she seems to be deriving so much enjoyment from his predicament. He resolves to trust her just this once, acknowledging that she did, in fact, help him. Turning back to her, he questions why she hasn't requested a seat change if her vision is truly as poor as she claimed, but she remains silent. She simply rests her chin on her hand, a serene and genuine smile gracing her features. With a soft, humming tone, she admits that she simply likes being right where she is. She remains an enigma to him, her playful salute and the sudden chime of the school bell only deepening his confusion. Despite their recent moment of connection, her true thoughts are still impossible to decipher. Following the chime of the bell and the subsequent seating lottery, she is placed in the very last row, prompting immediate concern from her classmates about her ability to see the board. While she quietly insists that she will be fine, he finds himself assigned to a nearby seat, drawing playful envy from his peers who jokingly beg to switch places with him. Turning back toward him, she reveals a face flushed with a deep, unmistakable blush and a soft, knowing smile. She simply adjusts her glasses, noting that they should solve any issues with the distance, while he is left dazed and unsteady by the intensity of her gaze, wondering exactly what it was he saw in her eyes at that moment as the school day continues. The energetic girl with twin tails, Urara, beams with excitement as she holds up her phone, suggesting to her classmates that since they are already settled on the bus, they should pass the time by playing cards. Her suggestion ripples through the crowded bus, where the air is thick with the chatter of students. Yuta looks up in genuine surprise when he realizes he's being included in the plans, while Takamiya and the others eagerly agree, noting how well-prepared their classmate Morikawa seems to be. Outside, the bus wends its way along a lush, tree-lined road, leaving the city behind for a day of outdoor learning designed to help the students embrace nature and strengthen their bonds. As the vehicle climbs higher, the students press against the windows, captivated by the breathtaking scenery unfolding before them, their faces lit with wonder at the vibrant landscape. Despite the cheerful atmosphere, he can't help but feel a sense of trepidation, reflecting on how he ended up in this specific group simply because Takamiya called out to them, leaving him as the only one seemingly burdened by a moral compass. She, however, remains a calm presence amidst the excitement, though her inclusion in the group hasn't gone unnoticed by the other girls, who whisper in surprise and envy that someone as popular as Izumi, and even Rei, ended up in this particular circle. To settle the division of labor for their upcoming meal, the group turns to a game of cards, with the stakes being the dreaded firewood duty versus the more desirable cooking roles. He finds himself momentarily lost in thought, snapped back to reality only when his companions urge him to pay attention to the high-stakes game unfolding. The tension rises as Rei casually mentions a warning he heard from an older student about the sheer brutality of gathering firewood, a comment that sends a visible shiver of dread through his brother. As the bus roars onward toward their destination, he steels his resolve, his mind focused on the cards in his hand and the singular goal of avoiding the grueling labor that awaits the losers. He arrives at the campsite amidst the lively chatter of his classmates as they begin to unload and gather for instructions. Carrying a heavy bundle of logs, he turns to his companion, questioning why she ended up assigned to the grueling firewood duty alongside him. The reason was simple. They were the bottom two crew, having lost the card game on the bus. While the cooking team celebrated their luck, he had been stuck with the heavy lifting because he finished dead last, with her right behind him in second to last place. As they trudge up the steep, wooded slope, the weight of the logs begins to take its toll. He watches her with growing concern as she wobbles unsteadily, her small frame barely able to manage the load. She suddenly drops her bundle with a sigh of relief, acting as if the job is complete, but he quickly reminds her that they haven't even reached the halfway point of their task. Their struggle is interrupted when a classmate, Hasegawa, approaches with a gentle concern, asking if they are holding up all right under the strain. She offers a warm, encouraging smile, insisting that they shouldn't hesitate to ask for help if the work becomes too much, leaving him momentarily stunned by her kindness. Nearby, the other students can't help but admire her grace, whispering about how she truly is one of the class's most radiant stars for being so considerate. Suddenly, a shadow falls over him as his partner reappears at his side, startling him with her abrupt return after her brief rest. She is visibly winded, her breath coming in heavy gasps as she tries to recover from the exertion. He realizes then that despite her best efforts, she is completely out of her element when it comes to physical labor. She hurries along, clutching a small bundle of wood, her brow furrowed with worry that they might miss the meal entirely. Beside her, Yuta struggles with a much larger load, his face flushed as he tries to correct her misunderstanding of his previous comment. She watches him in a heavy silence as she casts a sidelong, skeptical glance his way. He avoids her eyes, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple as the awkwardness of the moment lingers. They continue toward the campsite, and he mentions hearing that he is a nice guy, a claim that clearly catches her off guard. When she asks for clarification, he becomes defensive, yet she simply offers a soft, sincere word of gratitude that leaves him momentarily stunned. They reach the cooking area and are met with a sight that defies explanation, a pot filled with a viscous, bubbling black substance. He stares in silent horror at the dark mass, while she can only ask in disbelief what has become of their dinner. The group responsible for the culinary disaster, including a sheepish Morikawa, attempts to explain the situation with nervous laughter. They admit that the strange concoction was, at least in theory, intended to be curry. The group's secret ingredients, yogurt, honey, and entire bars of chocolate, are spotted nearby, solving the mystery of the foul brew. As they take their first tentative bites, she realizes with a start that the amateur chefs actually added every single one of those items into the pot. The reaction is immediate and visceral, with Rei recoiling in disgust and shouting about the terrible flavor. Despite the assault on their palates, she and Yuta continue to eat, their bodies trembling from the sheer intensity of the bizarre taste. They watch as the kitchen descends into frantic activity, with Morikawa reassigned to spice duty and others dispatched for fresh supplies. The air is thick with the sounds of chopping and a desperate scramble to salvage the meal. He hears a rumor begin to circulate among the students regarding his hidden talents amidst the chaos. They whisper about his supposed proficiency in the kitchen, a claim that leaves him looking genuinely bewildered. He listens as the conversation shifts to his habit of preparing his own lunches, with classmates praising the quality of the bento he brings to school. Hearing this, she finds herself lost in thought, reflecting on the idea of a meal prepared with such care. She and the rest of the group finish their meal with satisfied sighs, the plates now empty. The air is filled with praise for the meal, with Morikawa and the others declaring the rescue mission a total success. Even the secret ingredient Yuta added seemed to work wonders, leaving everyone in high spirits. As the others celebrate, he quietly continues his meal, reflecting on the adjustments he made to the seasoning. He feels a sense of relief that his last-minute intervention actually improved the flavor, though he remains humble about his contribution. The young chef finds himself growing increasingly anxious as he steals glances at the girl beside him. She has been eating in silence, offering no feedback, which leads him to worry that perhaps the dish wasn't to her liking after all. She finally breaks the silence when she looks up, a soft blush dusting her cheeks as she admits the food is truly delicious. The simple compliment sends a jolt through him, his heart racing at her unexpected and sincere reaction. He continues to eat, his own face flushing as he questions why her approval brings him such an intense sense of joy. His internal musing is interrupted when she leans in close, gently wiping a stray grain of rice from his cheek with a tender, matter-of-fact gesture. She remains lost in her own thoughts, wondering why his cooking has such a profound effect on her, unaware that she has managed to get even more rice stuck to her face. The quiet moment is suddenly shattered by the crackle of a loudspeaker, as an announcement blares across the campsite, calling for everyone's attention. The voice belongs to their instructor, who enthusiastically announces the start of a new recreation event, a grand treasure hunt set within the surrounding mountains. While the other students erupt in excitement at the prospect of a challenge, the two of them share a look of surprise, realizing their quiet afternoon is about to take a much more adventurous turn. The instructor, sporting a wide-brimmed hat and a confident smirk, lays out the challenge for the day. She explains that by using the map as a guide and solving puzzles along the way, the students might just stumble upon some genuine treasure. Hearing the mention of a $1,000,000 prize, the group erupts with excitement. While some remain skeptical about the actual value of the treasure, the sheer possibility is enough to send them charging forward into the woods, eager to find the first clue. As the others dash ahead, Izumi lags behind, her movements sluggish and heavy. Tano pauses, watching her shuffle along with a puzzled expression, wondering why she isn't keeping up with the rest of the energetic crowd. He continues to observe her, noting the slight furrow in her brow and her uncharacteristically somber mood. Even as Yuta shouts for them to hurry up from further down the trail, Tano can't shake the feeling that something about her is fundamentally different today. They eventually reach the first checkpoint, where a sign poses a riddle about their teacher's weekend activities. Faced with choices between wrestling, bowling, and aerobics, Yuta clutches his head in frustration, lamenting the impossibility of knowing such a specific detail. Without a moment's hesitation, she points toward the path marked for bowling. Her sudden certainty catches the boys off guard, leaving them staring in surprise at her decisive choice. She explains that the answer was hidden in plain sight during a recent lecture, recalling a moment when the teacher had mentioned her hobby. While the others marvel at her memory, she turns to Tano, playfully demanding the praise she feels she's earned for her sharp observation. The rest of the group joins in the celebration, acknowledging that they would have been completely lost without her intervention. She accepts the compliments with a modest smile, the earlier gloom seemingly lifted by the success of their first step in the hunt. She offers a soft, blushing smile, her eyes shimmering with a quiet warmth that puts his mind at ease. Observing her, he concludes that despite her earlier sluggishness, she seems to have recovered her spirits and is doing just fine. Following that moment of reassurance, the group throws themselves into the hunt with renewed vigor, tackling a series of riddles that range from counting cubs to identifying hidden flowers. They move through the forest like a whirlwind of energy, and she beams with pride, noting that they have already successfully solved a significant number of the challenges. However, the momentum of their success is suddenly interrupted when he realizes a member of their party is missing. He scans the immediate area with growing concern, prompting his companion to explain that she had stepped away to find some water, though even they admit she should have returned to the group by now. As the minutes tick away, the pressure of the competition begins to mount, with only 10 minutes remaining on the clock. He stares at the path ahead, his mind racing with the realization that even if she had gone for a drink, she shouldn't have wandered this far from their current position. The possibility that she might have lost her way begins to weigh heavily on him, and while he tries to dismiss the thought, he can't help but acknowledge that such a mishap is entirely within the realm of possibility for her. His imagination begins to run wild, picturing her getting easily distracted by a passing butterfly or perhaps collapsing from exhaustion while searching for a stream. These mental images of her wandering aimlessly or struggling alone only serve to deepen his growing sense of unease. Driven by a sudden impulse to find her, he abruptly announces to the rest of the group that he is also overcome with thirst and needs to find water immediately. His hand clenches tightly against his jacket, a physical manifestation of the urgency he feels as he prepares to break away from the main path. He charges into the thicket, ignoring the calls of his friends as he pushes through the rustling leaves and branches. After a frantic search, he finally spots her standing near a clearing, and he calls out to her with a mixture of relief and exasperation, glad to have found her before time ran out. Upon reaching her, he demands to know why she is so far off the beaten path when she was supposed to be looking for water. She simply points to a nearby sign that reads, "Treasure down here," revealing that she had been lured away by a blatant and incredibly simple trap. He lets out a long, weary sigh of relief, thankful that she wasn't actually in danger or truly lost in the woods. With the mystery of her disappearance solved, he informs her that the rest of the group has already moved on and urges her to hurry so they can catch up and finish the hunt together. He stops in his tracks, his gaze dropping to her feet as he notices a slight, pained hitch in her step. Concerned, he asks if she has managed to injure her foot during their trek. Surprised by his keen observation, She wonders how he could have possibly known. He explains that her behavior has been noticeably off and strange throughout the entire day. Because of the potential risk to her, he continues to press the issue, questioning why she didn't inform anyone about her condition, as being injured and alone in the woods is incredibly dangerous. The young man softens his tone, suggesting that she shouldn't feel obligated to push herself so hard just for the sake of a simple outdoor school activity. In response to his suggestion, she looks down, her cheeks flushing a deep crimson as she confesses that her persistence stemmed from how much she had truly been looking forward to this trip with the rest of the group. Her sudden, honest admission causes his heart to hammer against his ribs, a visible blush creeping onto his own face as he stares at her in stunned silence. He reflects on how she always seemed so difficult to read in the past, yet here she is, her emotions laid bare with such a clear and vulnerable expression while she nervously fidgets with her collar. Overwhelmed by the atmosphere, he quickly turns his head away and rubs the back of his neck, while she focuses intently on zipping up her jacket to hide her lingering embarrassment. To break the tension, he lets out a nervous laugh and teases her, remarking on how childish her reasoning sounds, which immediately draws an annoyed glare from her. Enraged by his mockery, she lunges forward and delivers a sharp headbutt to his chest, forcing a pained apology from him as they stumble through the forest. He carries her steadily through the woods, her weight barely a burden as she offers a soft apology for the trouble. He dismisses her concern, teasingly suggesting she needs to eat more, which prompts her to defend her appetite by mentioning the 2 servings of curry she had earlier. As they walk, she reflects on the day's events, the meal, the excitement of the treasure hunt, and the unfortunate blisters caused by the new shoes she had been so eager to wear. He hears her remark from just behind his ear, noting with a slight blush that he is surprisingly easy to read, though he quickly tries to brush it off as a joke. He feels her fingers dig into the fabric of his jacket as her grip on his shoulder suddenly tightens. She softly speaks his name, causing him to pause mid-step as a sense of confusion washes over him, waiting for her to continue. He continues walking through the quiet forest as she finally expresses her gratitude, her voice barely a whisper as she thanks him for coming to find her when she was alone. He remains silent, his own thoughts swirling with a new realization. While he once felt he couldn't trust her, he now sees a simpler, more genuine side to her character. The physical connection of her hand squeezing his shoulder again reinforces this shift in his perception. He is struck by a memory of the moment he first discovered her huddled in the woods, and he feels a sudden, heat-filled flush creep up his neck as he realizes the depth of his own reaction to her presence. He and Izumi eventually emerge from the trees to find the rest of the group waiting, with Yuta and the others relieved to see them return safely. The atmosphere shifts from intimate to celebratory as the group gathers around to discover what the final prize of their hunt actually is. The group's excitement quickly turns to collective despair when the treasure is revealed to be nothing more than a stack of 10 classical problems workbooks. The dreams of a million-yen prize vanish instantly, leaving the students wailing in comedic frustration over their academic reward. They are interrupted by the groans of the others as Hasegawa prepares to depart with a calm, knowing expression, while Hinagi watches the chaos with a smug sense of satisfaction. Yuta is left holding the unwanted books as the group begins to disperse, the long day of the treasure hunt finally drawing to a close. The school morning begins with the arrival of the esteemed Rei Hasegawa. As she walks through the halls, she is greeted with a chorus of admiration from her peers. Her presence is magnetic, drawing the attention of everyone she passes. She handles the attention with a practiced, effortless grace, her reputation as a flawless beauty preceding her every step. Even as fellow students offer to help with her duties, she remains the center of a whirlwind of social activity. Amidst the crowd, a sharp voice cuts through the chatter. Hinagi steps forward, her expression one of fierce protectiveness as she demands the others back away. She seems determined to act as a shield for her idol, her small stature belying the intensity of her command. She continues her reprimand, specifically pointing out that the group's enthusiasm is becoming a nuisance to Tano. The surrounding students pause, caught off guard by her sudden and vocal intervention on behalf of the upperclassmen. He, however, remains composed despite the sudden spotlight. Stepping forward with a polite bow, he offers a sincere apology to the group for any trouble caused. His humble demeanor only serves to heighten the respect his classmates feel for him, especially given his role as a class representative. With a gentle smile, the young man declines further assistance, expressing his gratitude for the offer while assuring everyone that he has the situation under control. His calm and kind response leaves a lasting impression on the girls nearby, who find his effortless charm utterly captivating. As the group begins to disperse, Rei continues on her way, her departure marked by the lingering gazes of those she left behind. The boys watch her go, struck by her aura of cool detachment, while the social dynamics of the morning settle back into a more routine rhythm. The focus shifts away from the bustling hallways to a quieter, more secluded area of the school. A simple sign marks the entrance to a private space, far removed from the public eyes of the student body. Inside, the energetic Hinagi reveals a far more intense side of her personality. Clutching her notebook, she is overcome with a frantic, almost feverish excitement as she records her observations. Her public persona as a protective sister is replaced by the raw enthusiasm of a dedicated fanatic, her thoughts consumed by the presence of the one she admires most. She remains hidden away, her frantic scribbling continuing even as the sounds of the school day carry on outside. As she hears Tano apologizing to Yuta for grabbing the wrong lunch, she reflects on the shock of Rei appearing in their class so unexpectedly, her mind racing with the implications while she remains tucked away in her private sanctuary. She remains locked in the restroom stall, her face flushed with a manic joy as she recalls the brief moment he smiled at her. Simply watching from a distance is no longer enough to satisfy her growing obsession. She craves a deeper connection and more direct interaction. To achieve this, she consults her meticulously kept notebook, which is filled with exhaustive data on his daily routines, from his arrival times to his preferred walking paths. Every detail of his school life has been cataloged, but she remains hungry for the secrets of his private world. Standing alone in the cramped space, she realizes that to uncover those hidden truths, she will need to change her approach. The time has come to move beyond observation and into direct action. Later that morning, she puts her plan into motion, greeting Tano with a bright, practiced smile as they meet in the hallway. He responds with a sleepy, somewhat surprised greeting, unaware of the intense scrutiny he is under. While she maintains her bubbly, twin-tail mode persona on the outside, her internal thoughts are far more predatory. She views Tano as a mere tool, a source of information to be drained so she can get closer to her true idol, Ray. She continues her performance, leaning in close to ask if he finished his homework and even offering to share her own notes. Noticing a slight discomfort, she solicitously asks if he's too warm and offers to adjust the classroom curtains for him. Despite her efforts, he remains indifferent, stating that he feels perfectly fine as he is. Her hand tightens around the fabric of the curtain, a small crack in her cheerful facade appearing as she processes his lack of response. The rejection sends her spiraling back into the privacy of the restroom, where she vents her frustration by slamming her fists against the stall walls. She is incensed that a cute girl, like herself, is being ignored, her ego bruised by his casual dismissal. However, her anger quickly cools into a calculating smirk as she watches him from the shadows of the hallway. Based on her observations, she had expected him to be an easy target for her charms, but his resistance suggests a complication. Her gaze then shifts to Izumi Hoju, whom she identifies as a significant threat. Seeing Izumi's proximity to Tano, she concludes that the girl is a likely rival for Rei's heart, marking her as a new obstacle to be dealt with. She notices the wrapped bento on his desk and asks if he brought his own lunch today. In the background, Hinagi watches them with a mischievous glint in her eyes, whispering to her friend about her plan to eavesdrop on their conversation and dig up some juicy gossip. She suddenly barges into their space, her voice loud and full of forced energy as she announces that her own lunch is just leftovers from the previous night. He looks on, startled by the sudden intrusion and the younger girl's high-pitched, artificial enthusiasm. She continues her performance, leaning in with a series of cutesy and flirty poses while questioning them about their food preferences. Her real goal, however, is to find out what kind of dishes her sister, Rei, enjoys, hoping to use the information to her advantage. She grows increasingly frustrated as her targets fail to give her the dramatic reaction she desires. While she internally screams for Izumi to seize the moment, the older girl remains quiet, observing the chaotic display with a calm, almost detached expression. She sits at her desk, the atmosphere between her and the boy remaining somewhat stiff despite the interruption. He offers a brief, polite compliment, trying to navigate the awkward social dynamic that Hinagi has created. He watches as the younger girl's plan falls apart, punctuated by the clatter of her dropping her chopsticks in frustration. She fumes silently, realizing that her elaborate twin-tail mode act has failed to produce a single useful detail about her sister's tastes. She decides that learning about his preferences is a waste of time, yet she continues to press him for information about his favorite side dishes. Her tone is sharp, her patience clearly exhausted by the lack of progress in her investigation. She stares back at the younger girl, her gaze intense and searching. In this moment of silence, she begins to see past the energetic facade, recognizing a familiar sense of desperation and hidden longing in the other girl's eyes. She lets out a soft, knowing chuckle, a blush warming her cheeks as a realization dawns on her. She concludes that despite their different approaches, they are essentially the same, both struggling with their own complicated feelings and clumsy attempts at connection. She is left completely baffled by the sudden change in the older girl's demeanor. The silent understanding that passed between them remains a mystery to her, leaving her staring in confusion as the lunch break continues. She watches from the sidelines, her suspicion growing as she observes the strange dynamic between the two. While the girl drools uncontrollably over a simple meal, the boy clutches his lunchbox tightly, accusing her of trying to steal his food. Retreating to the solitude of a bathroom stall, she slumps against the wall in a state of utter defeat. The weight of her failure hangs heavy. Instead of uncovering secrets about her idol, she has only managed to learn more about the bizarre relationship between her classmates. Her mind drifts back to the reason for her obsession, a moment of pure grace where the elegant Rei held her close. That gentle smile and the comforting presence of her idol are the only things that truly matter. Clutching her secret report notebook to her chest, her face flushes a deep crimson. The pages are filled not with tactical data, but with heartfelt declarations of her devotion to the one she admires most. Suddenly, her resolve returns with a fiery intensity as she stands tall, clutching the notebook with renewed purpose. She refuses to believe her efforts were in vain, convinced that those two must be hiding some truly scandalous information about Rei that she has yet to uncover. Meanwhile, the day draws to a close as the boy returns to the quiet of his home. He calls out a greeting, expecting a standard response from his housemate. He is met with a sight that stands in stark contrast to the polished image presented at school. The messy-haired youth stands there, scratching his stomach with a lazy grin, surrounded by a chaotic swirl of domestic disarray. The boy can only stare in stunned silence, his expression a mix of disbelief and disappointment. The gap between his friend's public persona and this disheveled reality is almost too much to process. He begins to lecture his friend about the mess, pointing out the discarded uniform left carelessly by the door. He warns that if anyone from school were to see this side of him, the shock would likely be fatal. The school was in the midst of a chaotic deep cleaning day. Amidst the chatter and the oppressive heat, Tano and Yuta found themselves assigned to the arduous task of weeding the grounds. As they worked, Hinagi approached them with an uncharacteristic sparkle in her eyes, claiming they were friends. Tano, wiping sweat from his brow, could only wonder when exactly this supposed friendship had even begun. She continued her charm offensive, showering them with compliments and acting remarkably sweet. While Yuta seemed to take the sudden kindness at face value, Tano remained wary, his eyes narrowing as he tried to decipher what she was actually trying to achieve with this sudden shift in demeanor. The ringing of the school bell finally signaled the end of the day's labor. As the boys slumped over in exhaustion, Hinagi's cheerful facade crumbled into a frustrated pout. She was annoyed that despite her efforts, Tano hadn't let slip a single detail about her sister, Rei. The path to friendship, she realized, was going to be much longer than she anticipated. Later, while resting her head on her arms, she reflected on her failure. She concluded that to truly get close to him and extract the information she craved, she would first need to build a genuine foundation. With a determined look, she decided to initiate Operation Friendship. As the fatigue of the day truly set in, she reached into her blazer, seeking the comfort of a familiar scent. She patted her pockets, expecting to find her most prized possession, but her hands met only empty fabric. A sudden, chilling realization struck her. Her eyes widened in sheer terror as the truth became undeniable. It was gone. Panic surged through her as she frantically tore through her belongings. She emptied her bag and searched every corner of her desk, tossing items aside in a desperate bid to find the memento she claimed to always keep by her side. This lost treasure was a precious bookmark, a memento featuring a cherished image of Rei-sama that she held dearer than anything else. Overcome with grief and desperation, she bolted from the room, her cries of apology to Rei-sama echoing down the hall. Tano watched her frantic retreat with a look of dark skepticism, questioning the sincerity of a love that could so easily lose its most vital symbol. He walks down the hallway with his friends, listening as they comment on how much Yuta has mellowed out recently, much to the other boys' chagrin. In response to the teasing, Yuta insists he only helped Hoja-san with a piggyback ride because she was physically unable to walk, his face flushing at the memory of the close contact. The boy shouts a denial, claiming his deep-seated distrust of girls remains unchanged, while his friends laugh and suggest his long-standing phobia might finally be cured. Their path is suddenly blocked by a dejected Hinagi, whose aura of gloom is palpable as she mutters about losing something precious that she simply cannot find. Seeing her distress, the boys immediately volunteer the group's help, grabbing him by the shoulders to ensure his participation as Hinagi reveals the lost item is a bookmark. Despite his protests about being dragged into the situation, he is forced into a game of rock, paper, scissors to divide the search party into two smaller groups. He finds himself paired alone with Hinagi, who offers a cheerful, if slightly forced, thanks for his assistance as they begin their search. While she internally fumes at his perceived rudeness, her frustration quickly turns back to despair as they scour the rooftop in vain for the missing memento. The boy breaks the silence to ask for a description of the item, prompting her to explain with a soft smile that it contains a pressed sakura petal given to her by Rei-sama. A realization hits him that her recent attempts to get close were likely just a means to find this connection to her sister, and though she tries to deny it, he simply sighs, admitting he has grown accustomed to being used. He listens as she recounts the mundane origin of her treasure, explaining how her brother simply plucked a stray petal from her hair, which she then meticulously preserved. He can't help but comment on the rarity of such a gift, his skepticism clear as he questions the nature of their relationship. This remark strikes a nerve, her eyes widening in shock as he bluntly labels her devotion as an obsession. She is momentarily speechless, the weight of his judgment hanging in the air. In response, she snaps at him to be quiet, her voice trembling as she reveals that her brother was the only person who showed her any kindness during a difficult time. He stands there, momentarily silenced by the weight of her past and the intensity of her outburst. Her eyes well with tears and her cheeks flush a deep crimson as she confesses the depth of her feelings, her voice a soft, vulnerable whisper of love for the one who stood by her when no one else would. Overwhelmed by the exchange, she quickly apologizes for involving them in her search and turns to flee, insisting she will find a lost bookmark on her own. He watches her retreating figure, the air between them heavy with unspoken words and a sudden sense of guilt. He tries to brush off the encounter, muttering to himself that he has no obligation to help her, yet his feet lead him through the heavy door and back toward the search despite his cynical internal monologue. Standing alone, he lets out a long, weary sigh. The image of her tear-streaked face and her heartfelt confession still burned into his mind, making it impossible to simply walk away. Meanwhile, back in the corridor, the others continue their search, only to realize that their companion has already slipped away to follow his own path, leaving them to wonder where he could have gone. Outside, the wind whips through the trees as he scans the grounds, noting that the bookmark is nowhere to be found and deducing that the only remaining place she could have gone was the area where they had been pulling weeds earlier that day. As the sun begins to dip, she walks away with a heavy heart, her forced smile failing to hide her loneliness as she tells the group she will manage just fine by herself. unaware that a silent search is still underway. Tano is knee-deep in trash bags, his sleeves rolled up as he rummages through the refuse. Hinagi stands by, her voice trembling with disbelief as she questions why he would go to such lengths for her. He simply offers a casual greeting, explaining his hunch that the lost item might have ended up here. Because of his selfless persistence, Hinagi is struck by a wave of guilt. She admits to herself that she had been using him for her own ends. Yet here he is, undeterred by the filth or the effort of the search. She watches his back as he continues the search, the realization dawning on her that he truly understands how much this means to her. It isn't just a piece of paper. It's something precious, and he treats it with the respect it deserves. This display of kindness brings back memories of a history of being exploited by others. For years, people have tried to use those close to her sister to get ahead, building a wall of distrust that makes his current actions even more baffling to her. As she reflects on this, she catches herself, realizing with a jolt that she was falling into that same pattern of manipulation. She had intended to just extract information from him, but seeing his genuine effort makes her stop in her tracks. He is a walking contradiction, a man who claims to be wary of others yet cannot turn away from someone in need. His peers often note how easily people take advantage of his inability to say no when trouble arises. Looking at him now, the complexity of his character fades away, leaving only a simple, undeniable truth in her mind. He isn't a fool or a tool. He is just a remarkably kind person. Suddenly, a sharp cry of triumph cuts through the quiet of the storage area. He emerges from the pile of bags, his face lighting up with a grin as he holds his discovery aloft. He shouts with relief, having finally located the missing treasure among the discarded waste. The young man steps forward and gently extends his hand, returning the bookmark to its rightful owner. He addresses her simply by her name, Hasegawa. As the search finally comes to a successful end, he watches as she lowers her gaze, her voice soft as she offers a sincere apology for her actions earlier that day. She clutches the recovered bookmark tightly to her chest, whispering a heartfelt thank you. He brushes it off with a quiet reassurance, though the weight of her sincerity hangs in the air. As they approach classroom 1-2, he can't help but comment on her intense attachment to the item, teasingly labeling her obsession with her sister as extreme. She seems to take the jab in stride, her focus remaining on the small treasure in her hands. The girl pauses, a look of internal conflict crossing her face as she calls out his name. She seems to be struggling with a realization, her usual energetic demeanor replaced by a somber reflection. She admits that her initial interest in him was purely transactional, a calculated attempt to extract information about her sister by any means necessary. She looks away, acknowledging the manipulative nature of her previous approach. Her confession takes a blunt, almost comical turn as she lists everything about him that initially grated on her nerves, from his sharp tongue to his very gaze, claiming his entire presence rubbed her the wrong way. He can only stand there, feeling more insulted than understood as she airs her grievances. She firmly declares that those days of manipulation are over, vowing to no longer use him as a mere tool for her investigations. The young girl bows deeply, offering another sincere apology for her behavior. When she looks up, a genuine, warm smile breaks across her face as she admits that, despite her initial impressions, he truly is a good person. Her spirited nature flares up again as she proclaims that true devotion means gathering information through her own efforts. She seems revitalized, her eyes sparkling with a newfound, albeit slightly eccentric, determination. She looks him directly in the eye and asks if they can start over as genuine friends. He meets her gaze, the tension of their rocky start finally dissolving into the possibility of a real bond. She immediately breaks the tender atmosphere, vigorously shaking him in a fit of comedic frustration. She rails against his sudden stubbornness, accusing him of ruining a perfectly wholesome moment with his unhinged refusal to cooperate. He, however, remains firm, his rejection absolute despite her frantic protests. Her frustration quickly evaporates into a light-hearted laugh, the tension of their previous confession replaced by a newfound, easy camaraderie. As they begin to walk together, she continues to tease him, suggesting that showing a softer side might actually make him popular with girls, though she quickly adds that he'll never reach the legendary status of her beloved sister. He grumbles in response, questioning why she feels the need to insult him every few seconds, but their bickering is interrupted when they spot a familiar group ahead. He watches silently as the other students prepare to head home, his thoughts turning cynical as he reflects on his past experiences of being used by others. She is quick to sense his darkening mood and sharply reminds him that she has moved past her manipulative ways, even as they observe their classmates, including the ever-composed Huju, departing together. His gaze lingers on the girl in the distance, who offers a soft, enigmatic smile as she walks away. The sight leaves him momentarily breathless, his mind racing with questions about the true nature of the girl who seems to exist in a world of her own. He finds himself flushed and trembling, overwhelmed by the realization that she remains a complete mystery to him. Beside him, his companion watches his reaction with a keen, observant eye, her expression shifting from curiosity to a mischievous sort of understanding. With a sudden, forceful smack to his back that sends a jolt of pain through him, she loudly encourages him to pursue her, playfully labeling him her future brother-in-law. He yelps in surprise and agony, reeling from both the physical blow and the startling implication of her words as their journey home takes an unexpected turn. The school sports festival is fast approaching, and today is a dedicated practice day. On the track, Yuta sprints with impressive speed, drawing gasps of admiration from the onlookers. Tano watches from the sidelines, wiping sweat from his brow with a towel as he acknowledges his friend's athletic prowess. He then wanders over to a small patch of shade where Izumi is resting. He comments on the tiny sliver of cool air she's managed to find, while she playfully remarks on how she maintains her style even while taking a break. He suggests a better spot nearby, but she seems content to stay put. Looking over at the suggested area, he realizes why she hasn't moved. A cluster of flowers has already claimed the better shade, leaving her with the only available spot. She turns her gaze toward him, noting that he is surprisingly fast on his feet during practice. He is caught off guard by her observation, not expecting her to pay attention to his performance. She sighs, admitting that her own laziness prevents her from moving even if she wanted to find a better spot. Their conversation is interrupted when Hinagi rushes up, calling out to him with urgency. She asks if he has a moment to discuss a relay between teams. He admits that he actually enjoys running, which seems to be exactly what she wanted to hear. They delve into the details of the upcoming mixed-grade relay race, an event that apparently everyone in class had already agreed to. He is surprised by how quickly things have been decided, but seeing no reason to refuse, he officially agrees to participate in the race. His interest peaks when he hears that Rei is also joining the relay. The news causes a visible reaction, a slight twitch of surprise as he processes the fact that they will be competing in the same event. Seeing his resolve, Hinagi declares her intention to cheer for him with all her might. Even though they are on opposing teams, her enthusiasm remains undimmed as she promises to be his biggest supporter during the competition. She sits slumped against the fence, gasping for air as she tries to entice him with the prospect of a sibling showdown, mentioning that Rei is also competing, but his response is a cold, immediate refusal. She is left stunned by his bluntness as he turns his back on her, stating flatly that he has no interest in the matter, leaving her to call out his name in a desperate attempt to stop him. He continues to walk away, ignoring her pleas, while she lets out a final, comical cry for help, addressing him with a ridiculous title that echoes across the school grounds. Shortly after his departure, the school bell chimes, signaling the end of the break as students fill the hallways with their idle chatter. Amidst the noise of the school day, he walks through the corridor alone, a heavy cloud of gloom hanging over him as he sighs in frustration, questioning why he always falls into the same patterns of behavior. His mind drifts back to the past, to a time when the finish line of a race was the only thing that mattered. Back then, his older brother was the only rival he ever truly acknowledged. He vividly recalls the moment they both crossed the line, breathless and sweat-soaked, with the older boy praising his speed despite the narrow margin. He remained relentlessly optimistic even in defeat, boldly declaring that he would be the victor in their next encounter. This constant comparison to him weighs heavily on the younger boy now. While his brother excelled at everything, he saw himself as nothing more than plain and average, lacking any standout abilities whatsoever. He stares off into the distance, haunted by the echoes of past praise directed at his brother, wondering exactly when this sense of inadequacy first began to take root. He reflects on the exact moment he began to surrender his ambition, recalling a childhood where he was constantly overshadowed by his brother's effortless success. Even the well-meaning words of others felt like a consolation prize, a reminder that his best was never quite enough to bridge the gap between them. Eventually, the constant weight of comparison became too much to bear, leading him to simply walk away from the race and the expectations of others altogether. This defeatist mindset has become a permanent fixture of his character, a trait he despises but accepts as an unchangeable truth of his existence. In the present, the contrast remains stark as he encounters his brother in the school hallway. Despite his brother's excellence in all things, he bitterly muses that his only advantage lies in mundane survival skills. When his brother offers a friendly invitation to walk home together, he is paralyzed by a complex mix of fear and resentment, questioning if his hesitation stems from a fear of never being the best. Admitting to himself that the fear of comparison is the true root of his anxiety, he quickly fabricates a task he must attend to and urges his brother to go on ahead. He flees the building, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he tries to put distance between himself and the source of his insecurity. His frantic escape is cut short when his foot catches on a stray piece of equipment, sending him tumbling headlong into a chaotic heap. Lying flat on his back and staring at the ceiling, he is struck by the pathetic nature of his own actions, realizing that he has spent his life running away from every meaningful challenge. He looks up from the dirt, his vision swimming as a familiar face comes into view. Izumi leans over him, her long, light hair framing her concerned expression as she asks if he is alright. Still reeling from the impact, he manages a weak confirmation while his mind races, wondering why she is even here. She crouches beside him, her presence both a comfort and a source of mounting awkwardness. She points toward the ground, noting that the specific spot where he landed feels quite nice. A deep flush creeps up his neck as the realization hits him. She witnessed his pathetic stumble in its entirety. To his surprise, she admits to having tripped in the exact same place just days prior, even finding the experience oddly cozy. He can't help but writhe on the ground, the sheer embarrassment of the situation overwhelming him despite her attempt at solidarity. She continues her praise of the location, highlighting the warmth of the sunlight and the pleasant atmosphere. While he remains huddled and flustered, she seems entirely unbothered, finding joy in the simple comfort of the earth. Later, the two find themselves indoors, gazing out through the bars of a window. A quiet moment passes between them, their eyes meeting in a silent acknowledgement of the shared afternoon. Sitting together in the hallway, she directs his attention to a nearby fan, explaining how it catches the breeze just right. He finds himself agreeing, the tension from earlier slowly beginning to dissipate. They watch the distant figures of their classmates practicing for the upcoming sports festival. She leans back, a small, content smile playing on her lips as she remarks on how peaceful the moment feels. The tranquility is suddenly broken by Hinagi, who bursts into the conversation with wild fantasies about the bread-eating race. She vividly describes a sea of carbohydrates, leaving him to dryly point out that the event doesn't quite work that way. Shifting the focus back to him, Izumi inquires about his own role in the festivities. He admits with a sigh that he's been relegated to the beanbag toss, a consequence of losing a simple game of rock, paper, scissors. He sits on the concrete steps, the weight of the upcoming sports festival pressing on him. When she asks about the relay race, Tano admits his reluctance, noting that he isn't particularly fast and that the presence of his older brother only adds to the pressure. As he speaks, he finds himself gripping his trousers, wondering why he is being so open with Izumi. Because of his hesitation, Izumi tilts her head, questioning why his brother's presence would make the race a problem. He struggles to find an answer, admitting that while he doesn't fully grasp the complicated feelings himself, the comparison is always there. In response to his self-doubt, she offers a simple, grounding thought. Regardless of who else is there, he is still himself. They sit in a comfortable silence for a moment, the school building looming behind them. He looks at her, struck by her directness. While he continues to compare his own abilities to his brother's perceived shadow, he realizes that she sees him with a clarity he lacks. Their conversation is momentarily interrupted when his gaze falls upon a single flower growing near the steps. She follows his look, her attention shifting to the solitary bloom. As they observe the plant, they realize it has been moved from its original spot in the shade. The change in environment seems to have had a profound effect on the small flower. The bloom, now bathed in the afternoon light, appears vibrant and full of life. She remarks on how bright it looks, noting that when given a chance in the sun, its true colors finally manifest. Turning her gaze back to him, she draws a parallel, assuring him that he will be just fine. She recalls seeing him run before, describing how he seemed to sparkle with effort and determination. She leans in closer, her expression softening with a sincere, encouraging smile. With absolute conviction, she tells him that he is their best bet for the upcoming race. Having said her piece, she stands up to leave, leaving him sitting on the steps in a state of stunned silence. He looks up at her, his heart racing as her words echo in his mind. He stands there, bewildered, questioning how she can be so certain of his success. He wonders why she doesn't just tell him he can't do it, struggling to understand where this unwavering faith comes from. Because of her simple, radiant smile and the weight of her words, a sudden brightness seems to envelop the moment. She looks back at him, her expression filled with a quiet, sparkling confidence that leaves him breathless. The impact of her encouragement sends him sprinting away, his heart racing with an unfamiliar, overwhelming sense of joy. He can't help but blush deeply, the sheer happiness of being believed in washing over him like a tidal wave. As he tears down the school hallway, he passes by two other students, his mind far too preoccupied with his own racing thoughts to notice them. The wind whistles past him, mirroring the frantic pace of his pulse. Moments later, he stops to catch his breath, his face flushed and damp with sweat. He tries to rationalize it, telling himself that she probably didn't mean anything special by it. Yet his chest continues to throb with a relentless, heavy beat. Despite his attempts to dismiss the feeling, her image remains burned into his mind, a constant reminder of her kindness. He finds himself wanting to trust in her belief, and, more than anything, to prove himself worthy of the expectations she has placed upon him. He clutches his chest, a look of pure confusion and intensity in his eyes as he grapples with this strange new sensation. He wonders what on earth this feeling could be, a mix of exhilaration and anxiety that he has never experienced before. Later, the official roster for the interclass relay race is posted on the bulletin board. There, under the pink team, his name is listed alongside his brother's, solidifying the challenge that lies ahead. In the quiet of the classroom, a voice rings out, urging everyone to turn their attention toward the front. The group gathers as Hoju, Hasegawa, and Hinagi reveal their borrowed cheer squad outfits, long, imposing coats that draw immediate gasps of admiration. They are all in high spirits, cheering each other on and promising to give their absolute best for the upcoming sports festival. She strikes a confident pose, demanding Tano's opinion on her new look. He tries to maintain his composure, glancing away with a faint blush while stammering that it doesn't matter, but his reaction only encourages her. She leans closer with a triumphant, smug expression, relishing the way he struggles to find his words. He is completely caught off guard, his heart racing as he stares at her, unable to look away. Nearby, Yuta can't help but tease his friend for being so blunt in the face of such beauty. Tano fidgets awkwardly, his silence speaking volumes as he tries to process the sight of Hoju in her uniform. She quickly snaps back, her face flushing a deep crimson as she rejects the suggestion of cheering for him during the relay. Despite her loud protests and claims that the idea is weird, her friends can't help but laugh at her obvious embarrassment. The day of the sports festival finally arrives at Shinmei High School. A large banner stands at the entrance, welcoming the crowds of students as they prepare for the day's competitions. Thinking back to their exchange, Tano realizes that his decision to join the relay race was driven entirely by her words. The memory of her determined face stays with him, fueling his own resolve. As the opening ceremony begins, he watches her from among the chattering crowd. Even with the festivities starting, he finds that just the sight of her is enough to make his heart pound with an intensity he can't ignore. He can feel his heart hammering against his ribs, a frantic rhythm triggered by the sight of her in that outfit. As she glances back with a faint blush, he quickly averts his eyes, his face burning with an intensity that matches the heat of the festival grounds. The sudden roar of the crowd breaks his trance as the first event, the ball toss, is officially announced. While the stadium erupts in cheers, his friend stands nearby, arms crossed, and looking utterly disinterested since his own competition won't begin for quite some time. Nearby, a small crowd has gathered around the school's idol, who is graciously posing for photos with her admirers. Her younger sister, however, is far less pleased with the attention, hovering protectively and warning others not to get too close. Out on the field, the pink team is already falling behind in the ball toss. Instead of throwing the balls one by one, she has decided to dump her entire basket at once, a chaotic strategy that leaves him and the other spectators completely baffled. While distracted by the spectacle on the field, he accidentally collides with a solid, towering figure. He immediately begins to stammer out an apology, still trying to process the confusing events of the day. The man he bumped into turns around, casting a shadow over him with a sharp, piercing glare. The stranger's presence is imposing, his features hardened into an expression that radiates a silent, intimidating intensity. Suddenly, the tension breaks as the large man reaches out and firmly grips his shoulder, though not in anger. He admits he was simply lost in thought and offers a casual apology for the collision, leaving the boy startled by the sudden shift in demeanor. Recognition finally dawns on him as his friend calls out to the man, revealing him to be his father. Standing beside the tall man is a cheerful woman who waves enthusiastically, both of them having arrived to support their son and his friend. He is genuinely surprised to see them both there, but they quickly reassure him that they wouldn't dream of missing the event. They speak with warmth, making it clear that they consider both boys to be their precious ones and are eager to cheer them on. As the couple begins to flirt openly, their affectionate display draws a crowd of curious onlookers. He can only watch in a mix of embarrassment and amusement, realizing that the overwhelming energy of his friend's family is just as intense as the festival itself. He stands there, slightly taken aback as Yuta's mother casually remarks that his lack of a following makes things much simpler for them. The comment stings just enough for him to wonder if he's just been subtly insulted, even as the woman's cheerful and oblivious demeanor remains unchanged. Nearby, Izumi beams with pride, holding up 2 fingers to signal her success in the ball toss event. She announces her achievement with a bright smile, her peachy pink shirt catching the light as she celebrates her small but meaningful victory in the competition. Her enthusiasm immediately draws the attention of Yuta's parents, who are instantly charmed by her energy. His mother gushes over how adorable she is, while his father offers a hearty word of praise, both of them turning to their son with eager curiosity to find out exactly who this girl is. The sudden spotlight leaves her flustered, her cheeks flushing as she struggles to find the right words to respond. Yuta's mother continues to marvel at her, her excitement bubbling over as she realizes this isn't just any classmate, but someone who clearly holds a special place in the group. Regaining her composure, she offers a polite introduction, identifying herself as Izumi Hoju to the curious couple. In return, they warmly introduce themselves as Yuta's parents, expressing their sincere gratitude to her for looking after their son during their time at school. The conversation takes an embarrassing turn for Yuta as his mother begins to ramble about how he usually keeps to himself and rarely speaks to girls. He frantically tries to cut her off, his face burning with shame as she continues to reveal more than he'd like about his social habits in front of his friends. She doesn't stop there, admitting that her son can be a bit blunt and insensitive at times. Leaning in with a conspiratorial air, she asks if his directness has been a bother, but Izumi quickly reassures her with a gentle smile, insisting that it hasn't been an issue at all. As she speaks, her mind drifts to the quiet moments she shared with Tano, recalling the time he selflessly lent her his umbrella and the many other instances where he stepped up to help when she needed it most. To her, his true nature is defined by a hidden kindness that goes far beyond his outward bluntness. While the women talk, Yuta's father maintains a steady, observant gaze on the young man standing nearby. There is a quiet intensity in his eyes, as if he is measuring Tano's character and trying to understand the depth of the bond that has formed between these students during the festival. The encounter concludes with a warm invitation from the mother, who encourages Izumi to visit their home whenever she has the chance. The suggestion catches Yuta completely off guard, leaving him standing there in a state of bewildered surprise as his parents continue their friendly but overwhelming interrogation. His father's hand clamped down firmly on the boy's shoulder, the sudden weight catching him completely off guard. The older man leaned in close, his expression unreadable behind his glasses as he declared that from this moment forward, the nature of their relationship would change. The man continued his intense display of hospitality, expressing how truly happy they would be if she remained close friends with their son. Beside him, his wife beamed with matching enthusiasm, while Yuta stood between them, his face a mask of pure mortification as his parents' overbearing friendliness reached a fever pitch, leaving Izumi to simply nod in polite, slightly overwhelmed agreement. As they finally began to depart, the couple offered a final, enthusiastic cheer for the upcoming events, prompting their son to shout after them in a desperate attempt to stop their embarrassing display. Despite the chaos, Izumi turned to him with a soft smile, remarking on how genuinely kind his parents seemed to be, though he remained skeptical of their methods. She began to walk away to join her own group, but paused to look back over her shoulder, her gaze lingering on him with a newfound intensity. With a gentle, almost teasing tone, she promised that she would be watching him as well, her words sending a sudden, rhythmic thrumming through his chest that he couldn't quite ignore. The clear sky above the school grounds seemed to mock his internal turmoil as he struggled to regain his composure. He cursed silently, pleading for his heart to stop its frantic racing after her unexpected parting words, the festive banners fluttering in the breeze as the competition loomed. Elsewhere on the field, the atmosphere shifted as the competitive spirit took hold of the older students. Yuta, now focused and determined, listened as a teammate confirmed his role as the anchor for the day's final relay race, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by a sharp, athletic intensity. He sat among his teammates in the blue team's tent, his popularity evident by the casual banter surrounding him. One of the boys noted how impressive it was that his younger brother was also participating in the same event, a fact that Yuta acknowledged with a simple, confident nod as he prepared for the heat. The scoreboard loomed over the track, showing the blue team in a commanding lead as the festival reached its peak. His teammates discussed the upcoming race, noting that while their opponents were undefeated, it was a bold move for anyone to try and face Yuta head-on, given his current streak. Back near the starting line, the younger brother felt the weight of the challenge ahead, his face flushed with a mix of nerves and resolve. He declared his intention to win this time, his thoughts drifting back to a previous encounter that fueled his current drive to prove himself on the track. From the sidelines, Hasegawa watched the preparations with a keen eye, noting to her companion how rare it was to see her brother so genuinely fired up for a competition. Yuta himself stood ready, a fierce, competitive glint in his eyes as he admitted to being completely pumped for the race ahead, determined to maintain his undefeated status. He declares with a confident smile that he will give this race everything he has, leaving no room for doubt. As he walks away to find some water, Tano watches him go, his mind racing with questions about this sudden shift in intensity. The boy reflects on how, until very recently, his friend had always gone out of his way to avoid any direct competition between them. Now, seeing that fire in his eyes, he realizes with a start that if his rival truly gives it his all, the possibility of defeat is very real. His train of thought is shattered by a piercing scream calling his friend's name, leaving him trembling in shock. Nearby, the athlete is being frantically shaken, plunging the scene into sudden, noisy chaos. The sports festival reaches its scorching final stretch, with the announcer's voice booming over the chatter of the crowd. Only 3 regular events remain, and the tension is palpable as the participants prepare for the climax. Amidst the heat and the noise, the realization that his turn is rapidly approaching begins to weigh heavily on the young runner. He is gripped by a sudden, paralyzing terror, his heart hammering against his ribs with a frantic rhythm. The prospect of performing in front of the entire school is overwhelming, leading him to question why he ever volunteered for such a high-pressure role. He feels like a coward, his resolve crumbling as the moment of truth draws near. Nearby, the heat has clearly taken its toll on the young woman in the pink team shirt, as she stands visibly flushed with steam practically rising from her shoulders. Her friends notice her distress immediately, commenting on the sweltering conditions and her lack of a fan to cool herself down. Seeing her struggle, they quickly mobilize to help, offering her water, salt supplements, and a fresh cooling towel. She gratefully accepts the supplies, her expression one of relief as she tries to combat the oppressive midday sun. The young woman is then presented with a specialized folding fan, as one of the boys points out that it features supportive messages for both of the key runners on its different sides. He encourages her to use it to cheer them both on, providing her with a practical tool to show her support during the upcoming race. She takes the fan with a soft word of thanks, her gaze lingering on the gift as the boys move off to prepare for their own roles. The small gesture of kindness seems to bolster her spirits amidst the chaotic energy of the festival grounds. Clutching the fan tightly, she stares at the bold lettering dedicated to the boy she is most anxious for, her eyes reflecting a quiet, intense determination. The weight of her expectations and her hope for his success are etched into her features as she prepares to take her place in the stands. The atmosphere reaches a fever pitch as the announcer calls for the final event of the day, the mixed-grade relay race. All eyes are drawn to the anchor of the blue team, a charismatic athlete who is met with a deafening roar of cheers and adoration from the crowd. His presence dominates the field, a stark contrast to the nervous energy of the other competitors. Standing side by side at the starting line, the two brothers prepare for the ultimate test of speed and endurance. As the starter's voice commands them to take their marks and get set, the world around them seems to fall away, leaving only the track ahead and the fierce competitive fire burning between them. He watches as the starter pistol fires with a sharp crack, and immediately, one of the runners loses their footing, stumbling as the race begins. In the stands, Izumi's friends marvel at the elaborate fan she holds, noting that while the peachy pink team has suffered an early setback, there is still hope if they can just get the baton to Yuta. She blushes slightly, admitting the fan was a gift, while the announcer's voice booms over the speakers. The blue team has taken a commanding lead, leaving the pink team trailing in dead last, though the stakes are clear. A victory here would secure the entire festival for the underdogs. Hearing his name called, Yuta stares ahead, his expression a mix of apprehension and resolve as the weight of the moment settles on his shoulders. He tries to play it cool when his older brother approaches, claiming he isn't nervous at all, but the lie is transparent. To his surprise, the elder Minato admits that he is actually the one feeling the pressure, contrasting himself with what he perceives as Yuta's natural composure. This admission triggers a memory for the younger boy, recalling a lifetime of standing in his brother's shadow, from childhood grades to athletic prowess. The older brother continues, confessing a long-held belief that he would eventually be overtaken by Yuta's potential. As he prepares to take his place as the anchor for the blue team, the crowd's cheers reach a fever pitch. He lets out a confident laugh, asserting that today won't be the day he loses, driven by a desire to remain a brother worthy of admiration. The transition is seamless as the baton finally reaches his outstretched hand, and he takes off like a shot, the spectators screaming his name in a frenzy of excitement. Watching that powerful stride, Yuta reflects on how his brother has always been his ultimate role model, his greatest source of pride, and his most daunting rival. It is this very perfection that haunts him. The fear of being measured against such an insurmountable standard is what truly makes his heart race with dread. He reflects on the crushing weight of the gap between himself and his brother, a distance that always seemed to whisper that he simply wasn't good enough whenever they competed. Looking toward his teammate, he realizes that Tano remains unchanged by these comparisons, a simple fact that begins to shift his own perspective. His gaze then finds Izumi in the stands, her face partially hidden behind a fan that boldly declares her unwavering support for him. This sight ignites something within him, and with a sudden, explosive burst of energy, he slams his foot down and snatches the baton in a perfectly timed transition. The young runner surges forward, the fear that once anchored him vanishing as he tears across the track, leaving spectators and teammates alike gasping at his incredible, almost flying speed. It all comes down to this final, desperate sprint between the blue and pink anchors, a blur of motion that ends with the sharp crack of the starter's pistols signaling the finish. As the dust settles, the crowd buzzes with excitement, acknowledging that while the legendary Ray secured the win, his younger brother proved himself to be a formidable force. He stands hunched over, lungs burning and body spent, while the victorious blue team celebrates their hard-fought triumph in the distance. Despite the sting of a second-place finish, a sense of accomplishment washes over him, and he calls out to Tano, acknowledging the shared effort of the race. The exhausted athlete is soon greeted by Izumi, whose gentle praise is quickly followed by a swarm of cheering friends, leaving them both with a quiet moment of connection amidst the post-race celebration. She stands with her back to him, surrounded by the chatter of other students as the post-race atmosphere settles, while he watches her with an unreadable expression. He calls out to Izumi as she starts to drift away, prompting her to pause and glance back over her shoulder with a questioning look. He lowers his gaze, the weight of the second-place finish heavy on his shoulders, and offers a quiet apology for not meeting the expectations she had placed in him. He is suddenly interrupted when she drapes a towel over his head and begins to rub his hair with playful aggression, catching him completely off guard as he sputters in confusion. He tries to protest the sudden treatment, but she cuts him off with a firm refusal, stepping into his personal space to maintain her hold. She leans in close to Yuta, her expression softening into a genuine, admiring smile as she tells him unequivocally that his performance was nothing short of amazing. She has provided a validation that sparks a realization within him. While losing to his brother typically brought only a dull ache, the knowledge that someone was truly watching him changed everything. He clutches the edges of the towel, his face flushing a deep crimson as the weight of her praise sinks in, leaving him momentarily speechless. He watches as she gives him a final, encouraging pat on the shoulder before announcing her departure to rejoin the rest of their classmates. She walks away just as Ray suddenly drapes an arm over him, radiating heat and boisterous energy, while exclaiming how much he enjoyed their competitive sprint, much to the younger boy's sweaty discomfort. He remains in high spirits, draping an arm around his younger brother and dismissing any lingering tension from the race. While Yuta grumbles about his brother's excessive energy, the elder Minato simply laughs it off, suggesting they settle their rivalry properly in the future. As the laughter fades, his expression softens into a knowing gaze, finally understanding the true source of his brother's desperate effort. He had wondered why the younger boy was pushing himself so far beyond his limits, but the answer is now clear as he watches Yuta's embarrassed reaction. His eyes drift toward the young woman standing nearby, her cheeks flushed with a gentle warmth as she watches the brothers. It becomes undeniable to him that her presence was the silent catalyst for everything that transpired on the track. With a mischievous smirk, he leans in close to probe further, prompting a frantic and loud denial from his brother. The younger Minato's face turns a deep shade of red as he tries to shout down the obvious truth, his composure completely shattered by the teasing. The school day begins under a clear sky, the modern building standing quiet before the morning rush of students fills its halls. Inside the bustling hallways, Tano calls out to his friend, but the greeting is quickly drowned out by a sudden, energetic crowd. A group of girls swarms Yuta, their voices a chaotic chorus of praise for his performance at the sports festival. They gush over how cool he looked and how he nearly beat the legendary Ray-sama, admitting they had no idea he was the younger brother of such a star. He can only stand there, overwhelmed, as Tano leans in with a mischievous smirk. His friend teases him about his sudden rise in popularity, suggesting that his big moment has finally arrived. Yuta, however, reacts with a mix of disbelief and irritation, his face flushing as he internally rejects the idea that this unwanted attention is a good thing. They continue their excited chatter, oblivious to his discomfort, as they recount how impressive he was on the track. He stares at them in utter confusion, his mind racing as he tries to process the sheer absurdity of the situation unfolding in the middle of the hallway. Just as he tries to find a way to escape, one of the girls leans in closer, her expression shifting to something more calculating. She begins to ask a follow-up question, catching him off guard and forcing him to pause in his tracks. Their true intentions quickly come to light as they bombard him with requests. One invites him to lunch just to hear more about his brother, another offers him homemade baked goods intended for Ray, and a third asks to swap contact information, explicitly mentioning she wants his brother's number as well. He feels a cold sweat break out as the realization hits him like a physical blow. Behind the friendly smiles and compliments, he sees the dark, looming shadows of their ulterior motives, confirming his worst fears about why they are suddenly so interested in him. It dawns on him that they haven't changed at all. They were simply lying in wait for the perfect opportunity to use him as a stepping stone to get closer to Ray. He had hoped things would be different in high school, but the familiar pattern of being overshadowed by his brother's fame is repeating itself once again. He is suddenly jolted from his thoughts as a shout rings out through the hall, announcing that Ray-sama is approaching. In an instant, the girls who were just surrounding him turn into a literal stampede, charging past him with frantic energy to greet the star athlete, leaving him standing alone in the wake of their departure. He walks through the school corridor, his shoulders slumped as Tano voices the harsh reality they both witnessed. Tano remarks on how pathetic it is that the girls are clearly using him as a stepping stone to reach his brother, Ray. The realization that their sudden friendliness was a facade leaves him feeling hollow, confirming his growing suspicion that all girls might be the same. As he enters the classroom, the heavy atmosphere is pierced by a familiar voice. Izumi stands there, her expression unreadable, offering a simple greeting of morning that catches him off guard. He pauses in his tracks, the word hanging in the air as he watches her walk past. A moment of hesitation grips him, forcing him to stop and process the encounter. The young man's mind races with doubt, recalling how he had actually begun to trust her recently. He looks at her with a new sense of wariness, now categorizing her as a person of interest whose motives must be questioned. Later, while seated at his desk, the sharp sound of approaching footsteps makes him tingle with anxiety. He instinctively scoots his chair away, his heart pounding as he wonders if she is truly just like the others, seeking a path to his brother. She leans in, her gaze fixed and intense, repeating her greeting with a firm morning. The sheer pressure of her stare sends a silent scream through his mind, leaving him paralyzed by her proximity. Seeing his lack of response, she doesn't back down, instead demanding to know why he didn't answer before repeating herself once more. He can only stammer in confusion, trapped by her persistence in the middle of the room. He remains caught in his own cynical thoughts, convinced that this is just another play for his brother's attention, just like always. Yet, as he looks at her, there is a flicker of something different in her eyes that challenges his bitterness. Finally, he manages to find his voice, ducking his head and muttering a shy greeting in return. Her face immediately brightens, and she chirps a cheerful confirmation, satisfied that she finally got through to him. She rewards his response with a radiant, genuine smile that seems to melt his defenses. With a soft good morning, she leaves him standing there, his previous doubts momentarily silenced by the warmth of her expression. She walks past him as he slams his head against the hallway wall, his face flushed with a mix of frustration and embarrassment. He berates himself, wondering what on earth he is doing, while her presence only seems to heighten his internal turmoil. Later, as he sits in class, the steady drone of the teacher's lecture fills the room, but his mind is far from the lesson. He sits hunched over his desk, staring blankly at his notes while the world continues around him. He begins to scrawl the word deception into his notebook, defining it as the act of deceiving people. He realizes with a sinking feeling that he has been far too careless lately, letting his guard down in ways he never intended. His thoughts spiral as he considers the possibility that her kindness is merely a calculated move to use him, much like others have done in the past. He warns himself to be more vigilant, yet a small, nagging part of him wonders if she truly is different. When the lunch bell rings, he brushes off a friendly greeting from Tano, claiming he has other matters to attend to. A heavy cloud of guilt and gloom hangs over him as he retreats into his own thoughts, feeling increasingly isolated from his peers. Suddenly, he notices a small, brightly wrapped soda candy placed gently on his desk. He looks down at the offering, his face heating up as he feels the weight of someone's unexpected attention. He looks up to find her leaning over from the adjacent desk with a simple, quiet offering. She tells him it is for him, her expression calm and expectant as she waits for his reaction. She watches as he immediately rejects the gesture, his voice tight as he tells her he doesn't want it. He turns his head away, unable to meet her gaze as he tries to maintain the walls he has built around himself. He is met with her quiet persistence as she points out that it is soda-flavored, as if that should settle the matter. When he sharply asks what that has to do with anything, she simply observes that he always seems happiest when he has something soda-flavored, a detail that catches him completely off guard. She observes his sudden jolt of surprise as he realizes how closely she has been watching him. She looks at him with a touch of confusion, softly admitting that she truly believed it was something he would enjoy, leaving him stunned by her sincerity. She remains the center of his internal storm as Yuta stares at the candy. His mind splits into two warring factions. One side argues her kindness is mindless habit, while a darker, more cynical voice warns him that he's being manipulated, questioning if he's really so easy to win over. This mental cacophony only grows louder, the cynical voice berating him for his perceived gullibility and reminding him of the dangers of trusting too easily. He sits there, beads of sweat forming as the internal debate reaches a fever pitch. Despite the warnings, he can't help but feel a warmth rising to his cheeks, his hand instinctively moving to cover his face as he tries to convince himself that his reaction has nothing to do with actually liking the gesture. He looks over to see Izumi looking uncharacteristically downcast, her posture slumped as she admits her ignorance regarding his true preferences. The sight of her genuine disappointment over such a small thing makes him realize how much effort she was actually putting in. The weight of his own internal conflict and her sincerity becomes too much, and he suddenly slams his forehead onto the hard surface of his desk with a muffled cry of frustration. While still buried against the wood, Yuta tightly grips the small candy wrapper in his hand and admits that she was, in fact, correct, leaving her blinking in confusion at the sudden change in his demeanor. The classroom falls into a brief, heavy silence as he finally voices the truth, stating clearly that he loves what she gave him. He remains hidden, his voice low and muffled as he clarifies that it is specifically the soda flavor he enjoys, his fingers still clutching the small prize. A quiet, almost pained thanks escapes him, his face a deep shade of crimson as he curses his own inability to stay composed under her influence. He squeezes the wrapper one last time, the crinkle of plastic echoing his internal state as he realizes that being near Hoju consistently shatters his defenses and leaves him completely off balance. He had left her completely speechless, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning realization. A deep, unmistakable crimson flooded her cheeks as she processed his sudden admission, her breath hitching in the quiet moment that followed. She remained frozen in that state of flustered disbelief until a cheerful voice broke the spell, as a friend hurried over with an apology for the delay. Noticing the heavy atmosphere, the newcomer curiously asked if something had happened, prompting a stammered, unconvincing denial from the girl. Meanwhile, the boy sat nearby, his face a mask of grumpy embarrassment as he focused intently on his snack, trying to ignore the lingering weight of his own words. The school stands quiet under the afternoon sun as a voice begins a hesitant confession. Standing outside the school building, a young woman finally gathers her courage to tell Ray that she has harbored feelings for him for a very long time. Her heart sinks as he gently delivers a rejection, explaining that he cannot reciprocate her feelings, though she manages a soft word of gratitude through the pain. She quickly tries to mask her disappointment with a flustered smile, claiming she already suspected his answer and simply needed to get the words out. Taking a breath, she then pivots to a rumor she heard, asking him if it is actually true that he has never had a girlfriend. He looks down at his feet and confirms it with a simple, honest admission that he never has, much to her bewildered surprise. With a radiant, almost blinding smile, he clarifies his current state of mind, declaring that at this moment, his heart is open to everyone equally. He receives her final thanks as she promises to continue supporting him before making her exit, leaving him standing alone in the quiet schoolyard. He collapses onto the sofa, the weight of his public persona finally crushing him as he groans in exhaustion. He wallows in self-pity, convinced that he is a pathetic loser who must never let the world see his true, unpolished self, feeling shackled by the very perfectionism he projects. He imagines a nightmare scenario where his admirers discover the truth, recoiling in disgust, and branding him a fraud for lying to them about his true nature. He tumbles off the couch with a painful thud, rolling across the floor in a frantic, tearful apology to his imaginary critics, terrified of being hated. The pathetic display is interrupted when his younger brother enters the room, clad in a cleaning apron and looking down with pure exasperation at the mess on the floor. He attempts to help by dragging himself across the floor like a human mop, but the younger boy quickly snaps that he is only making a bigger mess and should just rest. He retreats to the sofa to hug a pillow, while his brother notes the jarring and extreme contrast between his perfect public image and this domestic disaster. He sighs deeply, explaining that the immense pressure of maintaining a flawless image in public leaves him with absolutely no energy once he returns home, effectively turning him into a shapeless, unmotivated creature. He suddenly shifts the focus to his brother's love life, mentioning that he saw him with a girl recently, which causes the younger boy to jolt in surprise. He cleverly baits his brother into revealing the girl's name as Hoju before offering some brotherly advice, suggesting that Yuta should try to be more natural, because being overly stiff and formal will only end up turning people away. He continues his lazy sprawl on the couch, musing that everyone has a side they prefer to keep hidden from the world. His younger brother watches him, perhaps finally understanding the weight of the mask his sibling wears in public. As the younger boy prepares to head out for the day, he simply acknowledges the sentiment with a brief affirmation, leaving the older man to his domestic disarray. The quiet of the home is soon replaced by the familiar, sprawling facade of the school building under a bright, clear sky. Within those walls, the heat of the day begins to settle in, and the boy wipes sweat from his brow as the rhythmic, oppressive buzz of cicadas fills the air, signaling the arrival of summer's peak and the pests that come with it. He stands momentarily still in the hallway, the rising temperature seemingly slowing his thoughts as he stares blankly ahead. A sudden realization strikes him. His childhood tolerance for insects has vanished, replaced by a growing, visceral dread of anything that crawls or flies. He remembers a time when he was bolder, but now, even the thought of a bug sends a shiver of disgust through him, a phobia that has only intensified as he has grown older. His internal panic is interrupted when a soft voice commands him to stay perfectly still, and he feels a presence close beside him as a classmate approaches. With a swift, fearless motion, the girl reaches out and plucks a small creature from his shoulder, holding it up for a moment before it is gone. He can only stand there, trembling and breathless, as the immediate threat is neutralized by her steady hand. He manages to stammer out a word of thanks, looking at her with a mix of relief and genuine awe at her composure in the face of something he finds so repulsive. Curious, he asks how she can handle such things so casually, only for her to admit that she has her own limits, confessing a particular distaste for caterpillars that makes her seem a bit more human in his eyes. He recoils in disbelief, his voice cracking as he demands to know what she could possibly mean by such a nonchalant statement. Hoju simply shrugs it off, explaining that because the creature had a hard shell, it didn't bother her in the slightest. After a thoughtful pause, she notes that Tano shares a similar aversion to insects, her gaze drifting as she processes this new information about her friend. A playful smirk dances on her lips as she leans closer, whispering that his reaction was actually quite endearing. The comment hits him like a physical blow, sending a deep, crimson flush across his face as he stammers in surprise. The weight of the situation begins to sink in, and he feels a sudden, chilling sensation that she now holds a significant advantage over him. He watches her walk away, his mind racing with the implications of her knowing his secret. He is consumed by embarrassment, imagining her mocking his pathetic fear or, worse, using it as leverage to make him do her bidding. In this moment of panic, the cryptic warnings his brother once gave him finally begin to make sense. Desperate to regain some dignity, he pleads with her to simply forget what she saw, but she flatly refuses. She crouches down to his level, her expression softening as she admits that she has no intention of forgetting this new side of him she's discovered. Resting her chin on her hands, she gazes at him with a look of genuine warmth, confessing that knowing this secret actually brings her a sense of happiness. A heavy silence falls between them in the quiet school corridor, the air thick with the unspoken tension of their shared moment. He finally breaks the quiet, his voice low as he asks what she intends to do with this newfound knowledge. Unbeknownst to them, a pair of classmates watch from the doorway, wondering if they should interrupt the intimate scene. The heavy, rhythmic tolling of the school bell suddenly echoes through the halls, signaling the end of their private encounter and the start of the next period. He reflects on the recent encounter, feeling a bit frustrated by how composed she always seems. He ponders the idea that everyone has hidden facets they prefer to keep private, wondering what lies beneath her calm exterior. This realization hits him hard. Despite their proximity, he truly knows very little about her. He looks back at their conversation, where she claimed to have learned something new about him while remaining an enigma herself. As he zips up his school bag, the question lingers in his mind. What secrets could she be hiding? His train of thought is abruptly broken when a familiar voice calls out his name, pulling him back to the present. The young man turns to see his friends, Tano and another classmate, approaching him with an invitation to grab some food before heading home. He is caught off guard by the sudden change in atmosphere and the physical tug on his shoulder. They notice her standing nearby, preparing to leave. One of them mentions that her usual companion, Urara, has already departed, leaving her to walk home alone for the day. In a friendly gesture, they ask if she would like to join their group or if she's heading somewhere specific, like a bookstore. She politely declines, explaining that she has other plans for the afternoon. With a slight, uncharacteristic blush coloring her cheeks, she reveals her destination, a maid cafe. The admission is quiet but clear, catching everyone off guard with its unexpected nature. The revelation leaves the three boys completely stunned, their faces flushed with shock as they repeat her words in disbelief. The idea of the composed girl visiting such a place is a side of her they never expected to see. A quiet street corner is home to a quaint establishment named My Maid, its sign proudly announcing its identity as a maid cafe. Inside, the atmosphere is bright and welcoming, with checkered floors and neatly arranged tables where patrons are already being served by staff in frilly uniforms. Two of the servers, Morikawa and Yum, beam with practiced hospitality as they offer a synchronized greeting, welcoming their masters home with wide smiles and sparkling eyes. They are met by a group of students who have just arrived, including Yuta and his friends, who look around the themed interior with a mix of curiosity and awkwardness. As they are led to their table, Yuta whispers a hesitant question about whether they really needed to come, while his more enthusiastic companions assure him it will be fun. One of the girls in the group scans the room with a look of intense concentration, her eyes searching for a familiar face amidst the bustling cafe environment. Her search ends abruptly when Morikawa spots them and rushes over with a joyful cry, leaving the group, especially Yuta, completely stunned to see their classmate in such a different setting. She confirms with a cheerful nod that she does indeed work here, prompting Yuta to finally connect the dots regarding Izumi's earlier mention of a maid cafe. Once they are settled at a table, she explains that she only recently started the job because she found the uniforms to be incredibly cute, a sentiment her friends heartily agree with. Yuta compliments Morikawa's maid outfit, noting how well she pulls off the frills and the badge on her chest. She beams with gratitude, clearly pleased by the praise. She lets out a playful giggle, acknowledging his keen eye before turning her attention toward her friend. With a flourish, the energetic server presents a custom-made name tag, URH-on, which is so heavily decorated with beads and ribbons that it leaves him momentarily stunned by its sheer intensity. She explains with a bright smile that the tag is her favorite possession, having crammed it full of every little thing she loves. Her friend Izumi offers a gentle smile, remarking that the flashy accessory is cute and perfectly captures her vibrant personality. As the realization dawns on him that they are only there to support their classmate's part-time job, the server introduces them to her senior coworker, explaining that they are just visiting. Moments later, she beckons her friend away for a moment, leaving him sitting alone at the table, questioning his own purpose for being there. His internal grumbling is cut short by a sudden clatter of heels. He looks up to see a new figure approaching, only to be struck speechless by the sight of Izumi dressed in a full maid uniform. The energetic server reveals that the cafe allows guests to try on the outfits, a fact that leaves the boys in the group reeling from the unexpected transformation. Seeing his stunned expression, she leans in with a mischievous grin, teasing him about the visible blush spreading across his face as he struggles to find his words. He is completely overwhelmed, his face burning with a deep flush as his friends look on. One of them can barely handle the sugary atmosphere, noting that his brain is practically short-circuiting from the sheer intensity of the moment. As he struggles to regain his composure, she approaches the table with a professional air that feels entirely at odds with her frilled attire. He can't help but stare, wondering how she can remain so unfazed while wearing such a costume. Even as she politely asks for their orders, she waits patiently while his companions quickly decide on their meals, with one opting for the omurice set, but he remains trapped in his own thoughts. He watches her closely, searching for any sign of the embarrassment that is currently consuming him, but she remains a picture of poise. He tries to steel his resolve, telling himself that he cannot let a simple outfit shake his foundation. Despite his internal pep talk, his focus is still fractured, and he finds himself asking Tano for his order even though the other boy had just finished speaking. Sensing his hesitation, she turns her attention directly toward him, her gaze soft yet expectant. When he fails to find his words, she prompts him with a gentle tilt of her head, addressing him with the formal title required by her role. Leaning in closer, she lets the weight of that single word, master, hit him like a physical blow as her eyes lock onto his. The sudden proximity and the shift in her tone send a shock through his system, leaving him only able to stammer out a request for orange juice. Having finally managed to place his order, he slumps forward in a state of total defeat, realizing just how easily he was rattled. She simply acknowledges the request and turns to leave, her movements fluid and efficient. Behind him, his friends whisper about her usual calm and collected demeanor, noting that nothing typically phases her. He steals a glance at her retreating figure, agreeing that she usually carries a very steady vibe, though something about today feels different. Unbeknownst to him, she is now visibly flustered as she moves away, a deep blush creeping up her neck and cheeks despite the composed front she maintained at the table. The boys remain in their seats, entirely unaware of the internal turmoil she is now experiencing herself. Moments later, the cheerful atmosphere of the cafe returns in full force as Morikawa delivers the refreshments with a bright, energetic smile, thanking them for their patience. Morikawa sets the glass down with a sharp clack, her energy undiminished as she serves the table. She leans in, suggesting that they make the drink even tastier by performing a magic spell together, specifically the Momo Kyun ritual, which leaves the boys looking utterly bewildered by the sudden theatricality. She then turns her attention to Tano, playfully asking if he would like to give the spell a try, but he recoils, rejecting the offer with a loud, panicked shout. He quickly shifts the subject, noting how Izumi seems to be handling the maid persona with surprising professional ease, while Yuta simply accepts his beverage and offers a quiet word of thanks. He suddenly freezes mid-motion, a sharp realization dawning on him as he stares blankly ahead. He turns his gaze toward the girl in the frilled uniform, calling out to her as she stands hesitantly a few paces away. She is a portrait of absolute mortification, her face flushed a deep, burning crimson as she clutches her serving tray against her chest like a shield against his gaze. He finds himself unable to look away, completely struck by the raw, visible intensity of her embarrassment. When a friend nearby interjects, suggesting that his current perception of her is entirely mistaken, he can only blink in confusion and ask for an explanation of what they could possibly mean. The atmosphere between them remains thick with an agonizing silence. She is paralyzed by her own shyness, and he can only manage to stammer out that the entire situation has become far too overwhelming for him to handle normally. He eventually collapses forward, burying his face in his arms on the table as he laments the fact that the mere sight of her was enough to cause this total breakdown, even without a single word being spoken. While he remains slumped in his seat, she eventually finds a moment of quiet reflection later on, having changed back into her school vest and enjoying a drink with a bunny-themed straw as she silently appreciates the chance to have experienced the maid cafe. She sips her drink through a straw, insisting the experience was enjoyable despite the obvious nerves. Beside her, the young man can't help but point out that her face was bright red the entire time, a fact she tries to brush off with a quiet turn of her head. Because she wanted to understand the appeal of her friend Urara's work, she explains her motivation while taking another long sip. He remains skeptical, questioning why she would subject herself to such embarrassment if it wasn't necessary, but she hints that there was more to it than just curiosity. Her expression softens as she admits that seeing her friend's genuine happiness makes her feel happy in return. The memory of the cheerful maid's radiant smile seems to justify all the awkwardness she endured. This selfless logic leaves him staring blankly, privately labeling her a complete weirdo for her roundabout way of thinking. She remains lost in her own thoughts, seemingly unbothered by his silent judgment. Watching him label her a weirdo, she lets her gaze drift as she considers the group dynamic, noting the connection between her friends. She begins to voice a lingering observation, her tone shifting towards something more inquisitive as she reflects on the bonds she's witnessed. She finally asks him directly how long he and Morikawa have been so close, admitting that she is starting to understand the nature of their bond. The atmosphere in the booth grows slightly more serious as she probes into their history, seeking to confirm her suspicions. This curiosity stems from a memory of a chaotic moment when a sudden crash echoed through the hall, sending items rolling and scattering across the floor. Amidst the concern of bystanders asking if she was all right and the discovery of a lost name tag, the girl had apologized profusely for the collision, her voice trembling with regret. In that moment, the distressed maid had been devastated, lamenting the hard work that had seemingly gone to waste while her friend tried to reassure her. Her colleagues had rushed to her side, offering comfort and asking if she was okay as she struggled with the weight of the mishap. Flustered and apologetic, the girl had bowed repeatedly, her face a mask of worry as she tried to make amends for the accident. Despite the reassurances from those around her that it was fine, her distress was palpable, leaving a lasting impression on those watching. As the memory fades, her attention returns to the boy sitting across from her, her eyes filled with a newfound clarity. The pieces of the puzzle are starting to fit together, and her expression suggests she has reached a significant conclusion about the people around her. Yuta struggles under the weight of a heavy box filled with materials, his breath hitching as he navigates the hallway. As he passes the staff room, his eyes catch a glimpse of Morikawa, who sits slumped over a table, the usual spark of energy completely drained from her posture. He recalls how she has been in this state ever since the maid cafe incident, her spirit seemingly crushed by the weight of whatever transpired. The vibrant girl he knew has been replaced by a shadow of her former self, lost in a fog of dejection. Seeing the tears welling in her eyes, he confirms his fears. She is profoundly depressed. The sight of her silent suffering weighs heavily on him as he continues down the hall. Later, he arrives at the home economics room, only to be greeted by a sudden, sharp clatter from within. He pauses, reflecting on how Morikawa had poured her entire heart into her work, only for the situation to explode in her face, leaving her devastated. Stepping into the dim, quiet room, he freezes at the sight of a mysterious, shrouded figure sitting perfectly still in the corner. A chill runs down his spine as he hears a faint rustling, his mind racing with the irrational fear that a ghost might be haunting the school halls. Suddenly, the shroud slips away to reveal a face, but the shock is so abrupt that he lets out a piercing, terrified scream that echoes through the empty room. He stumbles back in a blind panic, only to realize that the specter is actually Tano, who stares back at him with a blank, unbothered expression while still partially draped in the white cloth. She calmly explains that she is in the middle of crafting a new name tag for Urara, her hands moving with practiced precision as she cuts through the fabric. When she mentions that one must first communicate with the cloth to achieve the best results, he can only look on in bewilderment at her bizarrely spiritual approach to sewing. Looking over the assortment of ribbons and materials spread across the workstation, she notes that she went out to purchase everything immediately after school ended, determined to finish the task she set for herself. She explains that lately, Urara has been feeling down, and seeing her force a smile made her want to take action. Yuta listens intently as she reveals her selfless motivation. After hearing her explanation, he decides it's time to head home, wishing her the best of luck with the project. She remains focused on her work, a determined but slightly frustrated expression on her face as she handles the scissors. He walks down the quiet school hallway, the sound of his footsteps echoing as he convinces himself that his presence is no longer required. Suddenly, a series of clumsy sounds from the room behind him makes him pause. He looks back to see her struggling immensely with the fabric, her movements awkward and uncoordinated. He realizes that getting further involved might lead to trouble with Hoju, yet he can't bring himself to leave her in such a state. The young man rushes back into the room, grabbing the edge of the large cloth to steady it so she can make a clean cut. Surprised by his sudden return, she offers a quick word of thanks as they work together. As they continue, he notices how exhausted she looks, her hair slightly disheveled and her gaze weary. He can't help but comment on her apparent clumsiness, noting that she seems like a bit of a ditz. She immediately bristles at the remark, insisting that she isn't a ditz but simply lacks dexterity. He counters that the two are essentially the same, while she recalls the various mishaps, pricked fingers, and dropped supplies that have plagued her efforts so far. The girl's intense gaze catches him off guard, and despite his teasing, he finds himself captivated by the sheer seriousness in her eyes. He realizes that he is now fully committed to helping her, drawn in by her sincerity. While he continues to assist her, he finally asks the question that has been on his mind. Why is she willing to go to such lengths for their friend? He watches as she pauses, her expression softening as she prepares to explain the depth of her feelings for Urara. She continues her story, explaining with a soft, nostalgic tone that Morikawa was her very first friend. He is taken aback by this revelation, questioning if Morikawa was truly her first friend, while she notes that Morikawa likely doesn't even realize the profound impact she had. In a memory of their school days, Morikawa greets her warmly in the morning. She reflects on how Morikawa spoke to her so openly and treated her like anyone else, which brought her immense happiness. She recalls how Morikawa taught her about fashion and accessories, filling a void since she had no one else to talk to in class. Listening to this, he realizes that Morikawa understands her better than most, as people often claim she is hard to read. She looks on with a soft smile, expressing that Morikawa is a precious friend who makes her world feel larger, and because of this, she is determined to do something special for her now. He watches her work with the scissors, struck by the realization that he has never heard her speak with such openness or passion before. She admits that she used to think she didn't care much about others, often being seen as easygoing or detached, almost like an alien in her own world. As they sit together, he contemplates how she is far more complex and different than the person he initially thought she was. Later, in the quiet of the school locker room, a gift bag addressed to him sits waiting inside his locker. His friends notice the gift and immediately begin teasing him about his sudden peak in popularity, much to his surprise and embarrassment. He stares down at the note in his hand, the words Mr. Popular ringing in his ears with a heavy dose of irony. The message is clear. The gift wasn't a gesture of affection for him, but a blatant bribe to obtain his brother Ray's phone number. Infuriated by the ulterior motive, he stomps away from his classmates, the sound of his heavy footsteps echoing as he violently rips the paper to shreds. His friends can only watch in silence, noting how truly terrifying he looks when his patience is pushed to its limit. As he marches down the hall, a silent tirade boils over regarding the insincerity of the gesture. To him, being used as a mere stepping stone is one of the most loathsome things imaginable, and the made with love sentiment on the note feels like a cruel mockery of genuine effort. He eventually stops by a window, his gaze fixed on the distance as a sense of hollow disappointment settles in. The world feels empty, cluttered with shallow gestures that carry no real weight or connection. His thoughts drift back to a recent conversation with Izumi, remembering her earnest desire to create something meaningful for Morikawa. Her sincerity stands in stark contrast to the shallow bribe he just discarded, highlighting what a real gift should represent. Walking through the quiet school corridor, he wonders if she will find the courage to present her gift properly. His internal monologue is interrupted by the sight of familiar shoes approaching from around the corner, signaling another unexpected encounter. The sudden meeting leaves both of them startled, with Izumi quickly turning away and stammering a defensive remark about not caring. He finds himself caught off guard, a faint blush creeping onto his cheeks at her characteristically flustered reaction. Sometime later, he finds himself struggling under the weight of a massive stack of supplies, his body wobbling with every step. It is the second day in a row he has crossed paths with her, and the sheer volume of materials he is hauling makes the coincidence feel even more overwhelming. He finally reaches his destination and pushes the door open, finding Izumi already inside and focused on her work. Tano is there as well, looking up in surprise as the burdened runner enters the room with a heavy thud of his cargo. Setting down a specific book on classic literature, he questions what she is still working on, noticing the unfinished name tags on the table. She offers a brief thanks for the delivery, though the atmosphere remains thick with the quiet tension of their shared task. He watches as she explains her creative process, her face flushed with a mix of concentration and excitement. She mentions her desire to make the project even cuter than originally planned, prompting a curious hum from him as he notices the pile of materials she has gathered. Because she knows Urara has a fondness for all things adorable, she decided to go above and beyond. As she speaks, she envisions the joy on her friend's face, which led her to incorporate an abundance of sparkles and intricate frills into the design. The young man stares at the handmade Yurichan name tag, realizing the sheer amount of effort involved. She sighs, admitting that even a full day of labor hasn't been quite enough to finish, leaving him struck by her unwavering dedication to the task. He compares her genuine effort to the manipulative tactics of others he has encountered recently. Unlike those who sought to use him for their own gain, she is acting out of pure, honest affection, seeking no reward other than her friend's happiness. He remains silent as he processes this realization, his eyes shielded by his dark fringe. The weight of her sincerity settles over him, highlighting the stark difference between her selfless nature and the shallow motives of his previous pursuers. After a moment, he begins to move away with the supplies, but the sight of her struggling with the needle and thread stops him in his tracks. She looks up, startled by his sudden pause. The classroom is quiet as they lock eyes for a brief, uncertain moment. He turns back toward her, his expression softening as he offers his assistance. The simple gesture carries a weight of newfound respect, surprising her with his sudden willingness to get involved in the tedious work. She blinks in disbelief, asking if he is truly serious about helping. When he confirms his intent, she turns to their companion, Tano, to share the news, her voice filled with a renewed sense of energy. Resting her head on her arms, she looks up with tired but hopeful eyes, wondering aloud if their friend will truly be happy with the result. He watches her, his heart stirred by the realization of just how deeply she cares for those around her. He stands beside Izumi, their hands busy with the delicate task of crafting the gift. As they work in the quiet room, a realization settles over him. She is unlike any other girl he has ever encountered, possessing a depth of sincerity that catches him off guard. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the school grounds, the building stands silent, holding the secret of their shared effort. The sky transforms into a canvas of soft light, with rays of sun piercing through the clouds as the day draws to a close. The following day, Izumi nervously presents the finished gift to Urara. The recipient's eyes widen in surprise and delight, her excitement bubbling over as she realizes the immense effort put into the handmade item. Overwhelmed with gratitude, she pulls her friend into a fierce, joyful embrace, their shared laughter filling the air as the bond between them strengthens. Later, Izumi approaches the window where Yuta is resting, her hand reaching out to offer him a small, peculiar object dangling from a string. She drops the handmade charm into his hand as he jumps back in surprise, explaining that it is a token of her appreciation for his help, crafted with the same care as the first gift. He stares down at the frilly, somewhat odd-looking creation, his brow furrowing as he mutters that he never asked for such a thing, trying to hide his growing embarrassment. Despite his dismissive words, he can't help but steal a glance at her, noticing the soft, expectant look on her face as she watches his reaction with bated breath. Standing alone by the window, he finds himself unable to stop looking at the little charm, questioning why a gift he claimed not to want is bringing such a genuine sense of warmth to his chest. In the quiet corners of the classroom, whispers began to circulate. One student leaned in close to her friend, sharing a secret meant only for their ears about a recent observation. Outside in the hallway, the subjects of their gossip, Tano and Huju, walked side by side, unaware of the eyes following them. The rumors gained traction as Wira adjusted her glasses, recounting a specific sighting. She claimed to have seen the pair looking remarkably cheerful while together in the sewing room. a detail that sent a ripple of excitement through those listening. This revelation hit the group like a physical shock. Takuya and Yuta sat frozen at their desks, their faces masks of pure disbelief as they processed the idea of the two being so close. Amidst the hushed speculation, Hinagi arrived with her usual boundless energy, offering a bright morning greeting. She quickly noticed the secretive atmosphere and questioned what could possibly be so engrossing this early in the day, only to be met with more frantic whispering about the rumored couple. Instead of dismissing the talk, she leaned in with a playful smile, admitting that she was just as curious as everyone else. She confessed that she, too, had been wondering about the true nature of the relationship between her friends. As the conversation deepened, Takuya looked away, lost in thought. He realized that despite the rumors, he hadn't actually seen his little brother-in-law and Hoju together much recently, casting a shadow of doubt over the schoolyard gossip. The group's excitement reached a fever pitch as they turned their attention back to Hinagi. They reasoned that since she was so close to them, she must be a treasure trove of secret information regarding the mysterious Reisama. She met their eager gazes with a sudden, chilling seriousness. Her expression flattened, and she delivered a blunt, unequivocal denial, stating firmly that what they suspected was definitely not the case. To clarify her stance, she explained that while there was a time she might have agreed with them, she was now speaking from the voice of experience. As the others looked on in confusion, she hinted that the reality of the situation was far more complex than a simple romance. She continues her explanation, meticulously folding a paper crane while the others listen. She mentions Hoju, prompting a curious glance from her companions as they discuss the rumors. Her friend, Wira, narrows her eyes with a sudden, sharp realization, her expression hardening into one of absolute certainty. Because of this epiphany, she slams her hands down, declaring her intent to confront Hoju directly. She sees it as a perfect opportunity to interrogate her about Tano while simultaneously gathering intelligence on the girl she admires. Hinagi recoils in shock, the sight of such obsessive behavior striking a painful chord of recognition within her as she reflects on her own past actions. Realizing the danger this poses to Tano's quiet life, she decides she must intervene at any cost to protect her lil bro-in-law. However, in her haste to stop them, her foot catches, and she begins to stumble forward. Instead of falling, she transforms the trip into a desperate maneuver she calls a rolling guard, tumbling across the classroom floor and scattering her classmates. She ends her frantic roll by lunging forward and grabbing hold of Tano to anchor herself. Clinging to him with a fierce, growling intensity, she vows that she won't let any of them get near him. While she views this chaotic display as a necessary act of atonement to protect his peace, he can only look on in utter bewilderment, wondering what has possessed her. Despite the absurdity of her methods, she manages to shield him from the inquisitive group for the rest of the morning, though the effort leaves her exhausted as the school bell finally signals a reprieve. Later, as they sit together, he reflects on how some people seem completely unaware of the feelings of those around them. She remains silent, her gaze fixed forward with a lingering sense of duty. Their brief moment of calm is shattered when Wira approaches, holding out her phone to show him a photograph of Hoju dressed as a maid, demanding that he look at it. Takamiya shows Tano the photos of Hoju in her maid outfit, noting how well it fits her. Tano agrees, finding the sight of her in the uniform absolutely adorable. He is taken aback when she confesses to saving every single image Urara sends her way, showing a surprising level of dedication to her collection. Observing her dedication, he remarks on how much she must truly like Morikawa-san. She offers a simple, quiet confirmation, her gaze fixed on her device. After a brief, contemplative silence, she adds that while she has plenty of photos of Urara, there is something else she is currently after. Suddenly, the sharp click of her phone echoes through the room as she captures a candid shot of his surprised face before he can even react. He stammers, asking why she is laughing, while she can't help but giggle at the success of her sudden ambush. Leaning forward on her desk with a mischievous glint in her eyes and a faint blush, she simply tells him that her reasons for taking the photo are a secret. The young man is left completely baffled, turning away as he tries to process the cryptic exchange and the sudden attention. Nearby, Hinagi is nearly overcome by the sweetness of the interaction she's witnessing, clutching herself in a fit of excitement while Wira teasingly offers her the newly taken photo. Realizing a practical hurdle, the girl stops him, noting that she still needs his contact information to actually send the picture she just took. She grins, expressing her surprise that the two of them hadn't already exchanged contact information. With a playful glint in her eyes, she explains that she simply cannot send him the photo she took unless he shares his details with her. He stands there, completely blindsided by the request, his mind racing as he tries to process the sudden social pressure. In the distance, a silent observer watches the interaction with a keen, curious gaze. Stuttering through a half-formed explanation, he eventually gives up on the conversation entirely. He mutters a quick apology and announces his sudden need to go buy a drink, making a hasty retreat while she watches him go, her expression a mix of confusion and mild disappointment. A heavy plastic bottle drops into the metal tray of the vending machine with a sharp, echoing thud. As he reaches for his drink, a familiar voice calls out to him, breaking his momentary solitude. He turns to find the girl with the large bow standing there, her eyes narrowed as she questions his odd behavior from moments ago. She continues to press him, teasingly suggesting that he and the other girl must be quite close if they were on the verge of exchanging contacts. He reacts with a sharp, defensive grunt, clearly annoyed by her prying, while she laughs off his irritation. Turning back toward the machine, he admits that he has made a firm decision to stop giving his contact information to girls. He He speaks with a heavy, somber tone, suggesting a deeper reason behind his sudden antisocial stance. This revelation catches her off guard, her eyes widening in genuine surprise. He looks away, his gaze fixed on the floor as he confesses that his past experiences with sharing his details have never ended well. He continues, his voice tinged with a bitter realization that he has always felt used by the girls he's known in the past. She remains silent, her usual energetic demeanor replaced by a look of quiet contemplation as she absorbs his words. After a long pause, she finally asks the question that has been lingering in the air, wondering if his new rule also applies to the elegant Hoju. He remains silent, the mention of her name casting a long shadow over his thoughts. Standing by the vending machine with Takamiya, the young man's grip tightens around his drink until the plastic buckles. A stream of tea spills over his hand and onto the pavement, a silent testament to the internal pressure he feels after their awkward exchange. He remains uncertain of how to handle the situation, his thoughts drifting as the school day begins. The morning air is filled with the usual chatter of students arriving, but his name echoes through the hallway, pulling him back to the reality of the classroom. Slumped at his desk, he rubs his weary eyes, the weight of his recent social anxieties clearly taking a toll. When Hoju arrives and takes her seat nearby, the two exchange a brief, clipped greeting, the simplicity of their words masking a growing distance. They sit in a heavy silence that stands in stark contrast to the lively clatter of their classmates around them. Though physically close, a palpable barrier seems to have formed between the two, leaving them isolated in their own thoughts. From across the room, Hinagi watches the pair, her usual energetic demeanor replaced by a look of quiet concern. She can feel the thick, awkward atmosphere hanging over them, realizing that the easy rapport they once shared has been replaced by an unsettling tension. The sun begins to set as the two walk down the quiet residential street, their laughter echoing against the utility poles in the fading light. As they reach a corner, the girl stops, noting that her home is just this way. He is caught off guard by how quickly the time has passed, expressing a desire to keep the conversation going. She agrees, mentioning how much she enjoys talking with him and suggesting they meet again. She then makes a bold suggestion, asking if they can swap contact information so they can talk anytime. He is visibly stunned by the request, his eyes widening in surprise before he eagerly agrees to the idea. Despite his excitement, a shadow of doubt crosses his mind as he recalls past experiences. He remembers how every girl before her had only been interested in getting closer to his brother, leaving him feeling like a mere stepping stone in their pursuit. Sensing his hesitation, she speaks his name softly, looking him directly in the eyes. She clarifies her intentions, stating firmly that she wants to know more about him, and him alone, rather than anyone else in his life. This simple declaration sparks a flicker of hope within him. He wonders if this time might actually be different, his hand tightening into a determined fist as he tries to push back his lingering cynicism and trust her words. They finalize the exchange, and as she walks away, he watches her go while clutching his phone. He desperately tries to convince himself that she isn't just using him to get to his brother, pleading with his own insecurities for it to be true. Later that night, the silence of his room is broken by the sharp, rhythmic vibration of his phone against the hard surface of the desk. He jolts awake, his eyes wide and breath hitching as he stares into the darkness, the sudden noise pulling him from his thoughts and into a state of high alert. He wakes up with a heavy sigh, the remnants of a dream still clinging to his mind like a persistent fog. He wonders why he's still so hung up on what happened, trying to shake off the lingering unease as he sits on the edge of his bed. Still sitting there, he checks his phone and sees a notification from Takamiya. He tries to convince himself he's just overthinking things, but the memory of the growing awkwardness between them is hard to ignore. He watches as the screen displays a group chat where Takamiya is casually suggesting they all hang out today. However, his mind drifts back to a much harsher exchange from the past, where she bluntly stated she was only interested in his brother, Raya-senpai, and was done talking to him entirely. He stares at the device, his expression darkening as he concludes that girls are always just after his brother anyway. He decides it might be better to simply close off his heart to avoid further disappointment. He begins to wonder if even Hoju-sen falls into that same category, her image appearing in his mind as he sits alone in the quiet of his room. Despite his reservations, he eventually meets up with the group outside, where a boisterous Takuya waves him over with an energetic shout. Takamiya stands nearby, her expression unreadable as the trio gathers in the bright daylight. Takuya leans in, questioning Takamiya about the sudden invitation, noting that she usually isn't the type to plan things ahead of time. She merely offers a knowing smirk, leaving the true motive behind the outing a mystery. The energetic youth leads the way as they begin to walk through the crowded streets, eagerly asking where they are headed, his excitement contrasting sharply with the quiet atmosphere surrounding the other two. He follows a few paces behind, still trapped in his own head and unable to shake the feeling that he doesn't really want to be there. Takuya notices his distance and calls out to him, but the words barely register. The trio eventually arrives at a bowling alley, where the clatter of pins fills the air. While his friend is in high spirits, he finds himself struggling with the sheer weight of a bowling ball, his physical exertion mirroring the emotional burden he's been carrying all morning. He is still reeling from the skating session, his face flushed with embarrassment as Takuya laughs at his lack of skill. Despite the fun they had, the sting of being called out for sucking at skating makes him snap back, insisting it was only his first time. Having agreed to the plan, he offers a quiet, distracted confirmation while Takuya suggests they relax for a bit before finding something to eat. His mind seems to be elsewhere, even as his friend turns to check if the suggestion works for him. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by a group of girls who recognize them from middle school, their voices filled with nostalgic excitement. They approach with wide smiles, surprised to run into Tano and his friends in such a place after so much time has passed. The pleasantries are short-lived, however, as the girls' focus shifts almost immediately away from him and toward his older brother. They mention how everyone at school still talks about Rei-senpai, eagerly asking how he is doing, which university he plans to attend, and if he has a girlfriend, their eyes sparkling with a shallow interest that he knows all too well. This familiar line of questioning causes a dark cloud to settle over him, his brow furrowing as he grits his teeth in silent frustration. He can't escape the shadow of his brother, even here, and the constant inquiries about Rei's personal life feel like a personal slight, reinforcing his belief that people only see him as a bridge to his sibling. Sensing the rising tension, Takuya brings the encounter to a swift end with a sharp clap of his hands, signaling that they are finished with the conversation. As the girls walk away, still chatting amongst themselves, Tano stands there trembling, the weight of his resentment boiling over as he realizes that, once again, nobody actually cares about him for who he is. He doesn't dwell on the awkward encounter, instead announcing with a casual wave that they are heading out to find something to drink. He leads the way, leaving the lingering awkwardness behind as they move toward a quieter area of the facility. Moments later, they find a spot to sit, and he hands Tano a cold can from a vending machine to help him cool off. Tano takes it with a muttered thanks, but the bitterness remains, and he sighs as he reflects on how, even after all this time, every interaction still seems to revolve around his brother. Leaning back with his own drink, he just laughs and teases Tano about his knack for getting tangled up with weird girls. He seems unfazed by the situation, his lighthearted attitude serving as a stark contrast to the heavy mood hanging over his friend. He looks over at his companion, his expression softening as he offers a simple, reassuring sentiment. As long as his friend is doing okay, then everything is fine. It's a rare moment of genuine support, though he quickly tries to move the conversation along to something less heavy. He hands over a can of sweet red bean soup, leaving his companion staring at the label in utter confusion. The dark-haired youth wonders what the strange offering is even supposed to mean as he takes a sip. Seeing the bewilderment, the prankster claims he won the drink in a draw, only to immediately burst into laughter and admit he was joking. He watches with amusement as his friend's expression shifts from curiosity to realization. The laughter intensifies as he mocks how easily his friend falls for anything. In response, the frustrated youth snaps back, his patience wearing thin at the constant teasing. Despite the ribbing, he softens his tone, suggesting that this gullibility is actually one of his friend's better qualities. The compliment catches the other boy off guard, leaving him to mutter a half-hearted dismissal while looking away. The conversation takes a more contemplative turn as he muses that there must be someone out there who can see the real person beneath the surface. They sit in a rare moment of quiet reflection, the weight of the words hanging in the air. Breaking the heavy mood, he jumps up to greet their arriving friends, triumphantly waving a winning bottle he actually managed to get. While he plays the part of the energetic group leader, his friend remains seated, struck by the idea of someone truly seeing him. Later, as he walks alone along the elevated tracks, the question continues to haunt him. He stares down at the ground, wondering if such a person, someone who sees him for himself and not his brother, could even exist in his world. His wandering leads him to a quiet riverside path, a place he usually only visits for errands at the supermarket. He feels the physical toll of the day's events, his shoulders slumped from exhaustion as he navigates the scenic route. Suddenly, he stops in his tracks as a familiar figure appears before him. The surprise is mutual, his eyes widen in shock, mirrored by the equally stunned expression of the girl standing just a few paces away. She is the first to break the silence, her voice soft as she questions what he is doing in this part of town. They stand facing each other under the fading light, an unexpected encounter at the end of a long day. She sits beside him on the grassy bank, explaining that her home is nearby, and she was simply out on a quick errand. After her brief explanation, a heavy silence settles between them as they watch the river flow past, neither quite knowing what to say next. He clenches his hand against the grass, overwhelmed by a sudden wave of awkwardness and wondering how he ever managed to speak to her so easily before. The tension is suddenly broken when she points excitedly toward the sky, urging him to look at something she spotted. They begin debating the shapes in the clouds, with her insisting one looks like a dog while he argues it resembles a cat. In the heat of the moment, their heads lean close together, causing him to recoil in a sudden, flustered jolt. Seeing his reaction, she lets out a genuine laugh, pleased that she managed to brighten his mood, while he watches her with a softened, curious expression. Her expression turns more serious as she admits she has been worried about him lately, noting that he seemed to be feeling down. When he asks who she could possibly be worried about, she looks him directly in the eye and clarifies that there is no one else she would be concerned for but him, leaving him stunned into silence. He reflects on how she seems to care for him just as much as his other friends do, but he is caught off guard when she asks if something specific is weighing on his mind. She explains that he is easy to read, citing his visible relief when answering questions in class or his simple joy over a favorite flavor of candy, proving that she has been watching him much more closely than he realized. She sits quietly, her presence commanding his full attention as he stares at her in a moment of quiet realization. Looking down at the grass, she laments her own nature, feeling like the worst kind of person while memories of her social interactions swirl around her like a distant, noisy crowd. Because of those past experiences, he had begun to lump every girl into the same category, assuming they were all identical in their intentions and behavior. He admits to himself that he had dismissed her as being just like the others, never even bothering to look up and see the individual standing before him. With a soft, knowing smile, she reveals the truth. She had actually been the one watching him all along. This revelation leaves him torn, wondering if her words are merely a clever trick, yet he finds himself unable to stay silent and calls out to her. Taking a deep breath, he clenches the grass beneath him and suggests they exchange contact information, desperately hoping that her kindness is genuine because he finds himself wanting to believe her. His face flushes with a sudden, intense heat as he confesses his true desire. He wants to know more. The air between them stills as he finishes his thought, looking directly at her and specifying that it is her. Specifically, he wishes to understand. Overwhelmed by his own boldness, he begins to stutter, his composure crumbling as he repeats his request for her contact information with a desperate, nervous energy. He watches as she offers a gentle, knowing smile, her eyes softening as she readily agrees to his request. A wave of relief washes over him, though his face remains flushed with the intensity of the moment. Moments later, their devices chime in unison as the digital exchange is finalized. She admits, with a touch of vulnerability, that his initial refusal had left her feeling unexpectedly lonely. This confession catches him off guard, his eyes widening in surprise at the thought that his actions could affect her so deeply. She continues, questioning her own reaction while he struggles to find the right words to apologize. As she gazes down at her phone, a playful, almost mischievous glint enters her eyes. She ponders the mystery of her own emotions, her cheeks tinged with a faint, warm glow. While she chuckles at the peculiar icon he chose for his profile, he remains lost in thought, questioning if he is making the right choice by letting someone in. Despite the lightheartedness of her teasing, he is haunted by a lingering fear of being hurt or betrayed once again. The weight of past experiences makes it difficult for him to fully embrace this new connection. He stares ahead, his expression a mask of internal conflict as he admits to himself that complete trust still feels like an impossible hurdle. The shadows of doubt are not so easily dispelled. Yet, as he looks at her sitting there, so open and genuine, a new resolve begins to take root. He realizes that, more than his fear, he feels a profound desire to truly understand the girl before him, deciding to take that frightening step forward. The morning sun shines over the high school as students begin their daily routine. Among them, Tano makes his way through the gates, blending into the crowd of uniforms. He sits at his desk, his mind drifting back to the previous evening. The simple act of exchanging contact information with Hoju feels like a monumental shift in their relationship. As he reflects, a wave of heat rushes to his face. He recalls the impulsive moment when he blurted out his desire to know her better, a memory that now makes him freeze in place with sheer embarrassment. He tries to compose himself, sliding into his seat, while mentally scolding his past self for being so forward. The realization of how awkward he must have seemed weighs heavily on him. A soft voice breaks through his internal monologue as Hoju stands before him, offering a gentle morning greeting that catches him completely off guard. Her greeting causes him to stammer out a response, his face turning a deep shade of crimson. His obvious distress doesn't go unnoticed, as a nearby classmate playfully teases him for his sudden, intense blushing. Despite the teasing, the two find a moment of relative quiet as she turns back toward him from her seat, her expression calm as she prepares to bring up a new topic. She presents a colorful flyer for an all-you-can-eat cake shop near the station, explaining that while she and Wira were interested, the promotion requires a group of at least 3 people. With a faint, inviting smile, she suggests that they should all go together sometime. The casual invitation leaves him stunned, his heart racing at the prospect of spending more time with her outside of school. He sits at his desk, staring blankly as he considers the invitation, non-committally suggesting he might attend if his schedule allows. Behind him, a classmate observes his hesitation with a knowing look, her presence a silent pressure in the quiet classroom. She leans in startlingly close, her sudden proximity catching him off guard and causing a flush of heat to rise to his cheeks. While he maintains a lingering sense of caution regarding Hoju, his companion notes with a playful glint that he is being uncharacteristically sincere today. Her expression softens into one of genuine curiosity as she confesses a desire to understand the mysterious girl better, urging him to promise they will spend more time together to bridge the gap between them. As the school day winds down, she walks away with a final, teasing reminder that he will surely make an appearance at the buffet, leaving him alone with his thoughts in the quiet classroom. Looking out, he notices that the tension between Yuta and Takamiya has finally dissipated, the two of them chatting animatedly, as if their previous friction never existed. Later, while walking through the school grounds, a sudden, fleeting thought crosses his mind, though its significance remains elusive in the moment. The moon hangs high over the Tano residence as he finishes a late-night bath, the cool air and the towel draped over his damp hair providing a much-needed sense of refreshment after the day's emotional hurdles. He settles onto the edge of his bed, the weight of the day's interactions pressing down on him as he recalls the strange, lingering gazes Takamiya and Hasegawa had directed his way earlier. The silence of his room is suddenly broken by the sharp vibration of his phone on the desk, and he turns in surprise to see a notification from Takamiya. His eyes widen in shock as he reads the screen, the name Izumi flashing before him. Yet his mind immediately jumps to Hoju as the implications of the message take hold. He tenses up, his body twitching with a mix of apprehension and curiosity as he stares at the device in his hand. Despite his initial hesitation and the internal alarm bells ringing, he decides to face whatever message Takamiya has sent, bracing himself for the unknown. The screen illuminates with a photograph from Izumi, showing a round, incredibly fluffy creature that looks more like a tanuki than a typical pet. Confused by the random image, he asks for clarification, only to be told it's a new canine friend she just met. He can't help but doubt the classification, certain the animal's features lean more toward the wild than the domestic. The notifications continue to chime incessantly as more photos of the creature flood his inbox. He eventually snaps, questioning the sheer volume of images and warning her about the etiquette of photographing other people's pets, though she casually dismisses his concern by mentioning the owner's permission. His anxiety spikes as the conversation shifts toward Hoju, with Takamiya bombarding him with pointed questions about her preferences and home life. He stares at the screen, his face shadowed by a growing sense of dread as he tries to decipher her true intentions behind this sudden interrogation. A new message vibrates against his palm, a simple inquiry into his current activities that feels far more loaded than it should. Sitting alone on his bed, he finds himself paralyzed by the mundane question, his mind racing to find a response that doesn't sound awkward or overly revealing. It strikes him then how long it has been since he engaged in this kind of casual, one-on-one digital banter with anyone outside his immediate circle. He begins to type a generic reply about preparing for the next day, but his fingers falter as a wave of self-consciousness washes over him. He can't help but wonder why she is even interested in his nightly routine in the first place. The internal pressure reaches a breaking point, and he lets out a silent, frustrated scream, clutching his head in exasperation at his own inability to handle a simple text message. In his agitated state, his grip fails, and the smartphone slips from his hand, colliding painfully with his face. He groans, the sharp sting of the impact a physical manifestation of the mental exhaustion he's brought upon himself. He sits frozen on his bed, his eyes wide with shock as a voice suddenly crackles from his phone, greeting him. The shock intensifies as the screen flickers to life, revealing Hoju's face in a video call, her expression one of mild surprise as she says his name. Realization hits him like a physical blow. His hand must have slipped, accidentally initiating the call, leaving her questioning why he reached out so late. She continues, her tone calm and surprisingly open, admitting that she doesn't actually mind talking face-to-face like this, which only deepens his stunned silence. As he stares at the screen, his focus narrows, a single detail about her appearance finally registering in his panicked mind. The girl on the screen is dressed for bed, wearing a set of pajamas covered in a whimsical dog pattern, and she casually notes the late hour while asking for his thoughts. She strikes a playful pose to show off the outfit, while he looks away, privately thinking the pattern is a bit ridiculous even as he struggles to find words. Unaware of his internal critique, she collapses onto her bed with a joyful giggle, clearly delighted by her comfortable attire. Watching her through the small screen, he is struck by how much she seems to genuinely love the silly pajamas, feeling a strange sense of intimacy that feels almost too close for comfort. Finally, the weight of the awkward situation crushes him, and he slumps over in his room, agonizing over whether he should try to be clever or simply find a way to end the call. He listens as she nestles into her bed, her voice soft through the receiver. She remarks on how pleasant it is to speak like this, away from the watchful eyes and structured environment of their school. In response, he stares at his own device in the quiet of his room, admitting that hearing her voice in such a private setting feels undeniably strange. She finds his honesty peculiar, her eyes reflecting a playful curiosity before the connection abruptly ends, leaving him staring at the darkened screen in confusion. He lets out a heavy sigh, slumping onto the edge of his bed while muttering that she is the one who is truly difficult to understand. As he sits in the silence, he realizes how little he actually knows about her, yet his heart skips when she asks if she might reach out to him again in the future. He gives a hesitant, blushing affirmation, unable to hide his flustered state as he looks away from the phone. After the interaction concludes, he remains seated on the floor, questioning the motives behind her sudden desire to contact him. He begins to whisper her name to the empty room, but the words catch in his throat as he realizes the weight of their growing connection. Meanwhile, she has already drifted into a peaceful sleep, her face serene against the floral patterns of her bedding. Back in his room, he is left wide-eyed and trembling with nervous energy, staring at the device that brought them together as the night deepens over the quiet neighborhood. A desperate plea echoes through the hallway as Morikawa, her eyes brimming with tears, clings to Izumi. She begs her friend for help, her voice cracking as she implores the other girl to teach her how to study before it's too late. Watching the scene unfold from a short distance, he observes the girl's distress with a mix of concern and awkwardness. She continues her lament, realizing with a jolt of panic that at her current pace, she is destined for the dreaded remedial classes. The calendar has turned to July, and with the heat of summer comes the cold reality of final exam season. Inside the bustling school, students scramble to prepare, the weight of the upcoming tests hanging heavy in the air. He finds himself paralyzed by the sheer scale of his own ambitions, staring blankly as he mentally tallies a summer schedule packed with beach trips, camping, and festivals, all while working 5 days a week. Beside him, the weight of academic failure causes Morikawa to slump over, her spirit seemingly broken by the mounting pressure. Their gloomy atmosphere is interrupted by the arrival of Takuya and a calm classmate with a bowl cut. Takuya, ever the observant one, asks if Morikawa's grades are truly that dire, prompting her to admit that the prospect of failing and being stuck in remedial classes is a nightmare she desperately wants to avoid. He then turns his mischievous gaze toward Tano, bluntly stating that the boy looks just as doomed as their friend. Tano snaps back in defensive denial, but his protest is cut short when Takuya gestures toward the quiet student behind them, suggesting they have a secret weapon in their midst. To prove his point, the energetic boy holds up a graded paper, revealing a dismal score of 5 out of 50 that belongs to Tano. The embarrassed student quickly tries to justify the failure, claiming he was caught off guard by a quiz he didn't even know was happening. Seeing an opportunity to help his struggling peers, the boy with the bowl cut raises a finger as a bright idea takes hold. He speaks up, his voice calm and reassuring amidst the chaos of their academic anxiety. He proposes that they all form a study group together, a suggestion that immediately lights up the room with a sense of hope. While the others cheer at the prospect of mutual support, Tano and Morikawa share a quiet moment of profound relief, their fears of summer school finally beginning to fade. He suggests they find a relaxing place to study on their next day off, but the library is currently closed for renovations. The group considers their options, eventually settling on a plan that catches everyone by surprise. Following his lead, Tano finds himself standing before a grand, modern residence, questioning how he ended up in this situation as the sheer scale of the house leaves him momentarily stunned. He recalls the conversation from earlier, where the group's momentum simply carried him along until the decision was made to meet at Hoju's home. The realization of where he is makes his heart race with a strange, nervous energy. Looking up at the impressive structure, he wonders about the kind of life Hoju leads in such a place. It is undeniably a beautiful home, far more elegant than he had imagined. Having arrived 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting time, he contemplates wandering off to kill time. However, his internal debate is cut short when a familiar voice calls out his name. His wait is interrupted as she approaches the gate, carrying a plastic bag filled with groceries, and offers a warm welcome. Noticing his early arrival, she greets him with a gentle smile as he stands there, slightly flustered. Leading him inside, she explains that the house is empty today and encourages him to relax and skip the formalities. He follows her through the entryway, offering a polite apology for the intrusion. She excitedly reveals the snacks she purchased for the group to share, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. He watches her, curious about why she was out running errands just as the study session was about to begin. With a playful smirk, she teases him, asking if his primary interest is the food rather than the books. He quickly counters, reminding her of their academic purpose, though her lighthearted mood is infectious. She points him toward the living room, instructing him to make himself at home while she prepares. He offers a quiet word of thanks, moving deeper into the quiet house as the study session begins. She had left him alone for a moment, allowing him to take in the surroundings. His eyes drifted to a collection of trophies lined up on a shelf, and he wondered if they all belonged to her. He marveled at the neatness of the display, speculating that she must have taken lessons to earn such accolades. He then noticed a large storage bin overflowing with snacks, finding the sheer size of the container a bit overwhelming for a simple snack box. She returned to the room, apologizing for the delay and explaining that she needed to retrieve something from that very bin. She began rummaging through the container, confirming his suspicion about its contents. She gestured toward the furniture, inviting him to take a seat on the sofa, to which he sheepishly agreed. He settled onto the couch, looking around the room and admitting to himself that he couldn't even begin to imagine the reality of her daily life. She soon approached with a tray, setting down a drink and some treats while offering another apology for the wait. Despite the grandeur of the house, he realized that her living space felt surprisingly grounded. He offered his thanks as she modestly downplayed the gesture, claiming it was nothing special. She then presented a peculiar snack called Choco Panic, featuring a cartoon crab, and asked if he found it cute, leaving him utterly baffled by the strange, panic-inducing treat. She holds out a small, decorative dish, explaining that it was a souvenir from her very first family trip back in elementary school. As she recalls the moment, a younger version of herself stands before a shop display, wanting the item but unable to find the words to ask for it. Fortunately, her parents noticed her longing and surprised her with the gift. Looking down at the plate resting on her tray next to a cold drink, she reflects on how that simple object is now overflowing with precious memories. She admits that despite the sentimental value, it was the only trip her family ever took, before showing off another peculiar souvenir, a crab with claws designed to hold snacks, which leaves him questioning the practicality of such a feature. Suddenly energized, she pulls out a stack of travel magazines, her eyes sparkling as she asks him where he would most like to go on a gourmet adventure. She begins spreading dozens of brochures across the floor, much to his surprise, insisting that they line them all up so he can point out every destination that catches his interest. When he points to a specific region he has visited before, she wonders aloud if he is some kind of seasoned travel expert, though he quickly downplays his experience. She mentions that her parents are quite the outdoor enthusiasts who love to travel, but confesses that if she were to go on a trip herself, her primary focus would be eating her way through the local cuisine. Watching her flip through the pages with such genuine interest, he realizes that seeing her in this relaxed, enthusiastic state feels like discovering a side of her he hadn't known before. He takes a quiet sip of his drink, his gaze lingering on her as he contemplates the unexpected depth and warmth she reveals when she lets her guard down. He sits on the sofa, sipping his drink while watching her flip through the travel magazines. He voices a quiet hope that one day, they might all be able to go on a trip together, just like a family. She looks down at the pages, a small smile playing on her lips as she agrees, finding the guide surprisingly easy to follow. Suddenly, she pauses, a look of realization crossing her face as she admits that she has never actually planned a journey on her own before. Looking up at him with a gentle, trusting gaze, she confesses that she would feel quite safe if he were the one accompanying her. The unexpected sincerity of her words leaves him completely flustered, his face flushing a deep red. He leans back, his mind racing as he wonders how a simple conversation about travel suddenly turned into a hypothetical trip for just the two of them. She, meanwhile, simply tilts her head, seemingly unaware of the impact her words had. Outside, the afternoon sun begins to dip as more guests arrive at the gate. Despite the time they've spent together, some still find her intentions and thoughts entirely impossible to decipher. The sky stretches wide over the quiet residential neighborhood, the power lines cutting through the soft clouds as the day transitions into evening. Once inside, the newcomers are immediately struck by the scale and elegance of the home. One of them admits to feeling a bit out of place, his nerves getting the better of him since he rarely visits the homes of others. As the group settles in, the atmosphere quickly shifts from a study session to a lively snack party filled with games and laughter. He watches the chaos from the sidelines, a skeptical expression on his face as he questions whether any actual schoolwork was accomplished. When he finally asks if they even opened a textbook, his friends exchange a long, silent look before unconvincingly insisting that they definitely did. He walks with his friends as the day winds down, listening to Takuya suggest they meet somewhere else next time. While Yuta confirms his bus schedule, he reaches into his pocket to check his own belongings. Suddenly, he freezes, his hands searching empty fabric. His friends stop and turn, confused by his sudden halt as the realization hits him that his phone is missing. Panting and out of breath, he explains to the others that he must have left it back at Hoju's house. He waves them off, promising to be careful as he turns to sprint back the way they came. He arrives back at the large residence, the chime of the doorbell echoing through the quiet evening. He sighs to himself, frustrated by his own constant forgetfulness as he waits for someone to answer. The door clicks open, and he immediately begins his apology, explaining his return to retrieve the forgotten device. His words trail off as he looks up, his eyes widening in sudden, silent shock at the person standing in the doorway. Instead of the familiar face he expected, a tall, imposing man with sharp, intense eyes stares down at him, his presence radiating a cold authority. The stranger looms over him, his voice low and demanding as he asks who the boy is, leaving him frozen in the doorway of the house he thought he knew. Yuta sits frozen on the sofa as the stranger slams his hands onto the low table with a deafening thud. He had only returned to retrieve his forgotten phone, yet now he finds himself trapped in a suffocating atmosphere, desperately questioning how a simple errand turned into this confrontation. He remains motionless under the man's heavy gaze. The silence stretches until the visitor finally breaks it, his voice low and demanding as he prepares to speak. The stranger leans forward, admitting he has no idea who the boy is before bluntly demanding his identity. Yuta can barely find his voice, his words catching in his throat as he tries to process the sudden interrogation. He stares back, paralyzed by the man's sheer physical presence. To him, the visitor looks massive and dangerous, possessing a rugged intensity that radiates pure intimidation. Summoning what little courage he has left, he introduces himself as Yuta Tano, a classmate of Hoju-san. The mention of the girl's name causes a visible twitch in the man's expression, a flicker of sharp interest. Without a word, the man produces a notebook and pen, slamming them onto the table with a violent force that makes Yuta recoil in terror. The sound echoes through the room like a gunshot. He leans in close, his shadow looming over the trembling student. As he commands Yuta to listen carefully, the boy is gripped by a primal fear, wondering if this encounter will be his last. The interrogation begins in earnest as the man recounts the details of the study session held at the Hoju residence. He fixes Yuta with a piercing stare, questioning if the two of them were alone, prompting a frantic, stuttering correction that there were actually 3 other students present. After hearing the explanation, the man finally relaxes his posture slightly, acknowledging that he understands the situation. He begins scribbling notes, his focus shifting to the information he has just extracted. He eventually departs, offering a curt word of thanks to Yohei-kun for the information as he leaves the exhausted student behind. Slumped over and drained of energy, Yuta can only watch him go, correcting the man's mistake in his head while wondering about the identity of the formidable stranger who just grilled him. He can't quite put his finger on it, but that intense, unreadable gaze feels strangely familiar. As he stares, trying to bridge the gap in his memory, the man simply looks back, his expression a locked vault of hidden intentions. Following the man into the living area, his eyes wander across the room until they land on a specific object leaning against the wall, sparking a moment of curiosity. He gestures toward the instrument, prompting the man to casually explain that it is indeed his guitar, confirming the hobby with a nonchalant nod. The revelation sparks a wave of genuine admiration in him, and he can't help but express how cool that is. The man takes the compliment in stride, mentioning that he plays in a band at his college, adding a layer of unexpected talent to his intimidating persona. Feeling a bit overeager, he quickly stammers out an apology for his outburst, but the man just offers a smug, knowing smile, assuring him that no harm was done and that he actually appreciates the praise. However, the way the man seems to bask in the praise, practically radiating a desire for more, leaves him feeling a bit unsettled by the sudden shift in atmosphere from threatening to strangely needy. The tension is broken when a familiar voice calls out from the doorway, asking if her big brother has finally returned home, her casual attire suggesting she was just relaxing. He freezes in pure shock as Izumi walks into the room, while the man simply acknowledges her presence with a calm greeting, confirming their sibling bond. Seeing the confusion written all over his face, the man finally offers a proper introduction, identifying himself as Hizuki Hoju, Izumi's older brother, and apologizing for the delayed formality. The realization hits him like a physical weight. He had always assumed Rei was an only child, yet here was her brother, casually handing out souvenirs to Izumi while he struggles to process the new family dynamic. He watches as Izumi offers a soft smile, her gratitude evident as she thanks him for his help. She watches as Hazuki collapses onto the sofa with a heavy thud, casually remarking that it has only been 3 days since his last stay. When asked if this is his first visit home in some time, he continues to explain that while he attends college and technically lives on his own, he frequently returns to the family home on nights when their parents are expected to work late. With a lazy, almost wistful expression, the older brother confesses that he would prefer to return every single day if possible, though he acknowledges that doing so would render the independence of living alone entirely pointless. He is soon revealed to be more than just an intimidating figure. As the boy watches, it becomes clear that Hazuki is simply an overprotective brother who dotes on his sisters, even going so far as to tidy up after Ray. He is caught off guard when the man's protective nature flares up again, questioning what might happen if a stranger were to approach Izumi while she was alone. He is momentarily distracted from the interrogation when Izumi suddenly remembers she left her phone behind, prompting the boy to offer to call the device to help her locate it. He watches as she accepts the help and steps away to retrieve the phone from where she left it. She leaves the two of them alone for a moment, allowing Hazuki to turn his piercing gaze back to the boy and bluntly ask about the nature of his relationship with Izumi, noting that possessing her direct contact information suggests a certain level of intimacy. He leans in close, his presence becoming suddenly oppressive as he demands to know why the boy would visit if they aren't truly close, leaving his guest stammering in a state of visible panic. He begins to speak of his sister, Izumi, observing that she has always struggled to articulate her feelings. Yuta listens intently as the older man shares this intimate observation. Continuing his reflection, he explains that while she used to find it difficult to express herself, she has recently begun to open up more. This change is evident in the way she now carries herself, often found smiling softly at her phone, though he laments that many people still tend to misunderstand her quiet nature. Turning his full attention back to the younger boy, he addresses him formally as Yutaro-kun, his gaze sharpening as he prepares to pose a direct question. He asks point-blank what Yuta truly thinks of Izumi, catching the boy off guard with the sudden shift in the conversation's way. As the boy stammers, trying to find the right words, the older man leans in with an intimidating hum, demanding a clear answer. Finally finding his voice, the youth admits that he finds her amazing, contrasting her directness and decisive actions with his own tendency to doubt himself over the smallest things. He reflects on how her simple, honest words provided the exact encouragement he needed, describing her as someone who can shine with a dazzling brightness. A heavy silence falls over the hallway as the weight of his sincere confession hangs in the air between them. Seemingly satisfied or perhaps just finished with his interrogation, the older man looks away and dismisses the topic, leaving the boy standing there with his thoughts. Away from his gaze, she sits alone on the floor, reflecting on her desire to find the inner strength to face her sister more earnestly, even if only by a small margin. While she contemplates her resolve, he absorbs the weight of the conversation, a sudden flush creeping up his neck as he looks away, acknowledging the situation with a quiet realization. Clearing his throat to break the tension, the older man regains his composure, though he can't help but notice the boy's own deepening blush and questions the cause of his sudden embarrassment. He extends his hand, returning the mobile device to its owner. The boy takes it, his face still burning with heat as he struggles to find the right words to explain himself. With a calm expression, the older brother suggests they postpone the rest of their discussion for a time when they aren't so rushed. The boy looks up, surprised by the sudden shift in tone and the use of his name. Turning his attention back toward the house, he calls out for his sister. Meanwhile, the boy makes his departure, his mind racing with confusion over the promise of a future meeting and the strange circumstances of their encounter. He hears her simple acknowledgement as she responds from within, her back turned while she listens to the news that their guest is finally heading home. She remains inside as the boy's figure grows smaller in the distance, while her brother watches him with a sharp, lingering gaze. The weight of their unfinished business hangs heavy in the air, promising a much longer and more intense confrontation in the days to come.